Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and we are live at myworldpod.com, and it is a Monday night, just a couple of hours before I hear there's a wrestling show, but all you need to know is that we're going to have a little fun today, talking about Victory Road 2004 with the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, Connie, I don't know if we're going to make it through today. We've already kind of kicked things off here before we roll, and we're live on My World Pod. That's pretty cool. There's also a football game tonight. You want to talk about football? I'm sure you will, but we'll get into football. And, we got into backstage fights. And, Conrad, that caused, I don't say a stir, but, that was a fun episode. I'll just say that. Was that that was last week. It feels like.
It sure was. Yes, sir. We heard about Abyss sitting on Kid Cash, which is a story I'd never heard before. And boy, it tickled me.
But anyway, a lot of fun. And you are off to the races. Little peek behind the window, inside baseball. Conrad is in rare form, folks. We were just kind of talking about social media. I don't want to give anything away or tell any secret tales, but for those that know, no explanations needed. For those that don't know, no explanation will do. But Connie, you nailed it.
Well, I'm excited that I can reveal here on the show today that you've nailed it because, of course, this past Thursday, we saw a big heck of a football game. It's always fun when we get a little football action on a Thursday night. And, Jeff, I've got a pretty straightforward question here.
Oh.
Mr. Jarrett, who beats the Bengals?
Oh, man. I don't want to cheat and Google as we get in the Google machine, but I'm just going to go out on a limb. Everybody beats the Bengals.
Lord have mercy. Old Joey Clipboard just cannot catch a break.
Oh.
I mean, my goodness, his stat line looks incredible until you look at the wins and losses. What's happening in Cincinnati, Jeff?
Yeah. I'd love to have our good friend on here just to have a little roundtable discussion, and he throws out stats. And I should we leave Clipboard Joey behind and just go to just make it just like the one word, like Madonna or Bono, or just one word nicknames. Just call him Tips, because Joey, my goodness, how many touchdowns did he have? And
all of them.
Yeah, every single one of them, and he's still got the big L. So my man Code Dog was all over that as well. He's all things Steelers. So when Clipboard Joey went down, he had a good time with it. But yeah, Abyss, Joey, you ain't gonna like this, but he is not a winner. He's a loser. My goodness.
I mean, his stat lines are incredible, but I don't know if he has no help around him or what. But goodness gracious,
and you got a great receiver. Did that Chase? Did you? I don't know.
I didn't get to watch any of this week's game,
but yeah, I'm thinking Jamar Chase. I'm going to get it wrong. So all these fantasy football experts out there, which I'm not one of, Conrad, I think it's the 9th highest fantasy score of all time. That's Clipboard Joey's teammate.
And they lose. It's amazing. Speaking of losers, Tennessee is going to play this weekend against a real pissed off Georgia. Georgia just toted an ass whooping against Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin came out and put on a clinic. It's the first non-Alabama loss that Georgia has received in like 50 games. Wow. I can't imagine now that they're going to be hosting the Tennessee Volunteers. I know that Tennessee's coming in at number 6 and Georgia's number 11, but this is kind of an elimination game at this point.
For sure.
Playoffs, loser goes home. Not necessarily guaranteed in the playoffs, but it's going to look pretty bleak, whoever loses that making the playoffs. And you're on the road in Athens. You got a prediction?
Connie, let me ask you something, just because your analytical side you've already thought it through. So Tennessee's a one-loss team, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they get beat by Georgia, do you think they're eliminated because it's this late in the season? Because who's going to the SEC championship because Georgia will have, yes, it's an elimination for Georgia, but is it for Tennessee? And going in there with a potentially wounded QB, has Nico come out? Has any of his injury status been updated? And boy, that was hush hush. That was hell. I thought they was doing a wrestling storyline. How quiet they kept everything and no information released. Do we know anything about Nico?
I don't.
Okay, so if Tennessee loses, do you think we're out of the playoffs?
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, I'll be honest. I would prefer if Tennessee wins because as an Alabama fan, I don't want to have to play Texas again the second time because it's really hard to beat the same team twice in the same season, as you know. So it just feels like I'd almost rather Alabama sit out the SEC championship. So I think it'd be great if Texas wound up playing Tennessee in the SEC championship. I don't care as much about winning the SEC title as I care about the playoffs. So I'm hopeful that Alabama doesn't wind up in that game. I'm going to be pulling for Tennessee, but it does feel like a big ask, like to ask them to come in to Athens fresh off of a big loss to Ole Miss.
Sure.
It's tough.
Oh, big time. Changing subjects, but you want me to make a prediction?
I do. I'm asking, like, what would you do if you were going to sort of bet the money line, if you will? What do you think you'd be looking at?
Well, that's why I was really wanting to know if we got a QB update. Without the QB, two chances, slim and none. With the QB, it's going to be tough. Between the hedges, Conrad, I hate to say it. Tried and true, go Big Orange. Man, it's going to be hard. If they would have shellacked Ole Miss, I think we're having a different conversation because they'd be on a roll. And like you said, they hadn't been beat by anybody but your Roll Tide boys. So I would
-9 is the betting line, just so you know.
Holy
9-point favorite at home, -9. Yes, sir. 9. That's how trash Tennessee is. -9.
The QB's out. I still don't think they're gonna. I don't think Georgia will cover. So I'll take the Vols.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll also see what happens.
Go ahead.
You've got a big meeting going down in Illinois that's baseball related, but everybody's sort of hush hush. I can't get a straight answer. What's going on this week?
Well, Springfield Lucky Horseshoes in the Prospect League. We're making moves and all that kind of stuff, but we will be revealing things this Friday. I'm making a trip up to Quincy, Illinois. That's about more or less giving it away. But follow me on social media at Real Jeff Jarrett, and I'll be releasing. And we got some really cool stuff. We'll talk about it in detail next week. My partners said, "Hey, man, just kind of keep it under wraps." There's a few things that have gotten out with the press up there, but looking forward to spending some time in Quincy, Illinois, about a baseball situation we're going to be revealing.
I can't wait to see more about that, and I can't wait to see Tennessee tote that ass whooping this weekend.
Hey,
it's going to be a lot of fun.
Let's get back on this. Did you see the Utah athletic director at the press conference?
I did. Boy, he was showing his whole ass, wasn't it? That was fun.
What's your thoughts on that?
I thought it was fantastic. We never see that. I mean, I like when people get invested like that. I mean, I understand why we've never seen it. I don't think I would want my guy doing that, but hey, it made for fun social media.
Buddy, he rolled up his sleeves and threw it all on the table. I'm curious to see kind of what the feedback comes off of that. But
it feels like somebody's going to be getting a fine somewhere. He was he had a case of the red ass, as Coach Rosie would say.
I was going to say, for folks that do not know, an athletic director from a college university football team, Utah, they got beat by what, 3? Or anyway,
it was a controversial call against BYU, who was undefeated.
Yes. And he voiced his opinion rather loudly and said, "Game, set, match. I'm out of here." I like this.
Hey, I was excited to be a part of this conference, and now I'm not. Wow, what a statement! Hey, speaking of a statement, there's been a lot of statements made this last week. Of course, lots of interesting headlines in mainstream media. And there's even some photos that I don't know that maybe you even had a chance to see. I wanted to see if you had a chance to catch these. I want to show them to you, perhaps for the first time.
Oh, boy.
To get a real live response. What do you think about your man, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson here on GQ?
What in the world to see? Look, we should have done a side-by-side, Silva, and had me in some of my outfits. But what are the shoes? The shoes, what?
I mean, is that jacket from Thriller just the wrong color?
What am I looking at, Conrad, for real?
That's a photo shoot that The Rock did for GQ. I'm trying to make heads or tails of it. I'm assuming that Karen already has these in your closet.
I can go look. I can almost give. I mean, look. Okay, stylish. The shoes just jump off the page. Like, what do we got going on down there? What are those?
Which part of the outfit do you like them? And by the way, this is not a wrestling gimmick. He's not wearing these on the way to the ring.
Yeah, no.
GQ was trying to convince us this is just what he wears. And
I like the jacket on the left. I like the leather. I can,
that looks like a wrestling jacket, does it not?
Does. Yeah, I mean, I can go for that. The leggings, and I've never been much on the leggings and the long gym shorts. And he's got pajamas on in the right with a hoodie. But
wait, why do you say they're pajamas?
Well, surely they are. Well, I mean, you know what I mean.
Those are just boot cut, right? Don't you have some pants that look just like that in that boot cut?
Well, Connie, you know my wardrobe.
Can I get you in a GQ? What would we put you in if you were in a GQ layout like this?
Oh my God. You tell me, pal. Oh boy. Conrad, I know you don't fly near as much as I do, but boy, walking through airports these days, and you just have to ask some folks like, and they obviously by design, the people watching has gone from about a 5 or a 6 to a lot of times it's up around 8 or 9. I can't say it's a 10, but mercy, there's some outfits that you see in airports these days. But
is there? Look at those shoes right there.
There it is. There it is. Thank you, Mr. Silva. Those right there.
Would you say these looks are like classic looks? I mean, real traditional.
Classic what? Classic Hollywood?
Well, let me just tell you, if you're looking for some clothes that fit you good and look good and make you feel good, look no further than True Classic.
Oh,
True Classic has best-selling T-shirts, hoodies, jeans, and more in 3, 6, and 9 packs, and we guarantee you won't look like that goof The Rock. We're talking premium products at an affordable price, shirts that define your best features for the perfect fit. We're talking snug in the arms and the chest with just the right amount of room in the midsection. And just in time for the fall and winter, they've got long sleeve Henleys, waffle hoodies, jeans, button-ups, joggers, and more. Have I mentioned their active wear on here before? They've got moisture wicking, quick dry, and odor control. And you can truly mix and match this clothing to work with your lifestyle. And what I like best about True Classic is when we find a shirt that fits us good, hey, we're guys. It instantly becomes our favorite shirt. We wear it out. Well, now you don't have to wear yours out. True Classic is here to hook you up with a 3, 6, or a 9 pack. Now, when you find what you're looking for, you can get it a bunch of colors and rock it. They've got more than 4 million customers at True Classic. They've got more than 200,000 positive reviews at True Classic. And they also have a 100% perfect fit guarantee and easy returns. The holidays are here, and True Classic's ultra comfortable, perfect fitting essentials make for the perfect gift for you and the men in your life. So if you're ready to upgrade your closet, shop now and unlock big savings during their huge holiday sale. Just go to our exclusive link at trueclassic.com/myworld. That's trueclassic.com/myworld. Please support our show and tell them we sent you in the year with holiday cheer, thanks to our friends at True Classic. So, Jeff, I'm pretty fired up, man. You know, we were talking about all things going on in October of 2004. 20 years ago, and we're going to pick it up and talk about November of 2004. What was the feedback you got from last week's episode?
You know, because all the build up and my brain's going to get rattled. The Hall and Nash, how do I say that, Conrad? The Hall and Nash discussion, the acceptance, the question, you know, the transition that we made during that time to go from, the weekly pay-per-view to the Fox Sports Net and then do our first monthly, when we kind of looked at all factors and knowing that we were going to be in the studio for the next 12 months and kind of the numbers that we ran, there was, you know, the talent didn't know that, but internally we all looked at it with it was a new day. It was certainly a transition from where we had been the last 2.5 years. And, you know, we talked about it last week, 2004, we weren't that far removed from Jeff Hardy, arguably being the hottest babyface in the industry. He had his issues. Me and him had a relationship that went back to the early to mid 90s. And so, yep, there was a few hiccups along the way, but me and Hardy with Hall and Nash on board, and we were, trying to make this the biggest splash that we possibly could. And we, that was our focus. And especially during those days, TNA, the little engine that could, we had all kind of come together, and we were super excited about the opportunity, and not just this event, but the next 12 months to come.
We got to talk a little bit about the new strategy here, because as we know, Victory Road is going to be the first 3-hour pay-per-view for TNA. You guys are going to be abandoning the weekly pay-per-views on Wednesday nights. Now you're going to go to Sunday nights for once a month, and there's lots of speculation in the newsletters. Here's one report. If Victory Road can do 20,000 buys while the company wouldn't be profitable overall, it would have to be called a success. At 30,000 buys, if they can maintain that monthly, they've got themselves the beginnings of a nice small business. Although at this point, with so little buzz on the show, it would be closer to 12,000. I'm not big on pricing points being a big factor in people buying wrestling shows. If it does less than 10,000 buys, which is certainly possible, even though this company can't make money short term under any circumstances, I can see people putting money up at first, souring fast. As a long-term project, it's far more important to have a good or a great show, to recognize if there is a future for the company. It isn't now, and it won't be until they're on a stronger network and in a better time slot. A terrible show in the current marketplace at $29.95 will take a long time to overcome. Case in point was UFC 33, and that retarded the progress of that company by 12 to 18 months, as it wasn't until they hit Ken Shamrock versus Tito Ortiz as a home run that one could say the UFC had fully recovered from its first bad show. Now, this is something you and I have never really talked about, that, hey, once you sell a $29.95 pay-per-view, if you lose that consumer confidence, meaning if they don't love it, they're less likely to try it a second time. And we're seeing specific examples laid out about how that strategy really bit the UFC in the ass. Is that something that was even on your radar here, that, hey, if we don't nail this, if we don't hit a home run, we've lost them for good?
Conrad, I love doing these podcasts, because you just a second ago, you said the feedback, and in my brain, I was re-engaging all the discussions I've had over the last 7 days. But one of the ones I failed to mention is kind of just directly goes to your point here. And this is something that, we're, what are we, November the 11th, 2024. When you think of AJ Styles and a few other guys that kind of started around him, in my brain, I can't even imagine a world where that generation, I'll just say AJ because it's the best example, that he started and there was no YouTube, there was no Twitter, there was certainly no Instagram, Facebook, and all that. So word of mouth, and yes, the online audience, and OneWrestling.com and Meltzer in those days was, better than me, he is much more of a newsletter as opposed to an online publication. Is that fair? And the Torch and
yeah, I mean, Dave wasn't online until the last 10 years.
Oh God. Okay. So my point being, in that, I'm going to go even back to the Memphis days, it was every show you better deliver. People are paying their money. And I'll just say, in the live event business, hate to say old Evansville, but Evansville in the territory days, Conrad, back in the day, truth be known, they got the worst of our weekly towns because it was a smaller venue. We didn't draw as much money. So as opposed to maybe we'll say 7 matches, you might have got 6 or even 5, and some guys worked twice. But even whether it's a 5-match card or a 6-match card or something, everybody went out and busted their ass. It was just in the DNA. It's that you work smarter, and I learned so many things on that through the years. But to say that in the TNA days, on our first pay-per-view, I don't think anybody had we didn't have a point of reference like, oh man, if this show doesn't come off, we're going to have to get online and that doesn't make sense. But no, Conrad, every show that you produced, especially knowing that if we don't deliver, and it was pretty cool that they reference UFC 33 laying an egg. It happens. It always happens, but you just kind of have to rebuild. Being this our first one, I can assure you that me and the creative team and anybody else that became in contact, we would look at that pay-per-view and spend, some people say, you spent hours on that? Well, unfortunately we did, or fortunately we did. But yeah, thinking through finishes, thinking through the layout of the show, the order, how we come on the air, how we go off the air, the roller coaster rides you want to take them on, knowing that, when you're in a studio and going to put them on a 2.5, 3 hour ride, by design, you can't keep them at a fever pitch. You can't keep them on a scale of 1 to 10 at an 8, 9, or 10 for 3 straight hours. I don't even think that's a good show. I think you have to take them up and down. And so that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But knowing today, with all the social media content and all the mindset and the instantaneous age of information, of immediate feedback that we deal with now, those days didn't exist. So this first pay-per-view, we better come out of the gate as strong as possible, but we didn't really digest how much the pressure was really on us because it's all we knew.
It's interesting too, because you look back and there is a graveyard of failed promotions after one bad pay-per-view. Whether it's the Heroes of Wrestling thing that happened in down by Biloxi, or maybe it's Herb Abrams' UWF and the way that thing flopped. And even in more recent years, it wasn't all that long ago that the WWE CW, in the scheme of things, after December to December, that's it. Like one bad pay-per-view and they're gone. You'd even see like the AWA. They would try Super Clash, and these shows became known for how poorly they did, and the promotions really never recovered. When you're obviously you didn't have the insight to know what was going to happen with ECW yet. That hasn't happened at this point. The WWE CW. But all the other promotions that had this big super show, even WWA, which you had just seen a couple of years prior to this. I mean, he does the big show. He puts it on pay-per-view. He thinks there's going to be a huge audience there, and it's just not there. I know that once upon a time you felt like, yeah, but this is different. We're going to do weekly Wednesday pay-per-views at a reduced cost. But when you're going to that more traditional once a month, $29.95, it's got to feel like you're on a razor's edge here almost. I mean, this is nut cutting time, right?
Oh boy. And as you were I knew you were where you're going for this. And yes, the pressure, and I think of those days, we're November of 04, right, Conrad?
Yeah.
We're not even that, we're 2.5 years into the company, which is still, relatively new and fresh. But as you were just saying that, Conrad, it took me back to, if I almost, my old man, Jarrett, the amount of times I've heard kind of this speech, and he would say it diplomatically. He would never raise his voice. He was very calm, but he would often get phone calls, and I could kind of tell once I started hearing that he would get a phone call. And sometimes if I was answering the phones and he was out or in a meeting in the living room or whatever, he would get folks that would want to talk to him and tell them, hey, Jerry, I would really like to get some talent from you. I'm going to run this show and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And here's what we're going to do. And they're all hyped up and they're going to tell my old man how they're going to do it better than him. And people don't even really understand what they're saying is that I'm going to do this. Jerry, I'm not going to do the stuff you do down at the Coliseum or at the Louisville Gardens. I'm going to do it this way and this way, just on and on and on. And they're selling the show, not only trying to sell it to my dad. He would say, I think they're trying to sell it to themselves to get them to believe. But he would always kind of wait until everything got out and find out kind of the financial situation and what the guy's putting up and what his expectation, because he would literally try to do his very best and let him know that here's kind of some options and crawl, walk, run, and all the lessons I learned on that, Conrad. But at the very strategic moment, if you will, he would say, Mr. So-and-so, so-and-so, if I could walk you to this place that I call the graveyard of promoters, you might have a second thought about all your ideas, because that entire graveyard is full of folks that kind of told me what you're telling me, that you know how to do it better than I do, and this is going to be your first show. So when I'm preparing for this 3-hour pay-per-view, Conrad, all those kind of different thoughts, I knew that we better, I don't say have a great show, but yeah, that was the pressure. We can't have just an average show. We need to have a blowaway show to just kickstart this monthly pay-per-view. So yes, a lot of pressure, and when I think back on it, Conrad, yes, I'm crazy. I got a certificate that says I'm crazy, but not only am I executive producing, but I'm wrestling in it and then dealing with all the other stuff, 9 to 5 or whatever, 9 to 9 on the day in, day out basis. But that kind of pressure I loved. But yes, Connie, I got long-winded there, but the point is, yeah, it was a massive amount of pressure.
It's got to make you feel good when you're feeling that pressure and you negotiate with Fox Sports Net to promote the Best Damn Sports Show period, which is now going to be called the Best Damn Wrestling Event period. It's going to air on November 10th and November 11th. And of course, Fox Sports Net is saying they're going to promote this really, really hard. And they've done this before for the UFC, and it was one of their highest rated events. I think Vitor Belfort was on that once upon a time. I really enjoyed that show. They had a James Toney event that set an all-time ratings record for the show. So we can look back and see where it was successful, but for whatever reason, the TNA version was not as successful. Here's what's written in the newsletters. There were a lot of issues coming out of those tapings, which left Dixie Carter telling people she thought the wrestler should have put on a better performance. And the Best Damn Sports Show period people couldn't have been happy regarding the treatment of the host, Chris Rose, when Piper went into business for himself and against the script. Talk to me a little bit about the Best Damn Sports Show period, what you remember about this, what Dixie's talking about with her disappointment allegedly in the performance, and what you thought of the whole Piper Chris Rose stuff.
Well, don't let me forget. I know you won't let me come back to the Piper, but I think a lot of people don't have a clue what the Best Damn Sports Show period is. Well, Fox Sports Net, for those that aren't really familiar with it, it is a group. What's it called now? Bally's or Diamond Sports, but it was a group of regional networks that if you live in the Atlanta Braves area, you had Braves Net, Braves games, or if you lived out west, whatever pro team, but it was a bunch of regional networks under one umbrella. But every night out of LA, they produced a show, and sometimes it was different time slots because they shot it in the afternoons. Chris Rose, John Sally, Tom Arnold, I'm going to forget a few others, but it had 4 or 5 athletes. And to me, Conrad, in a lot of ways, it was ahead of its time because it was kind of off the wall, but athletes, you look at ESPN or Fox Sports now, and they have all the different talking heads, and, you see Cam Newton in the morning, he'll have on a different hat, but loud personalities. And they talked about, obviously, what went on field or inside on the court or whatever it may be, but they did all kinds of things. And George Greenberg, who is now the executive vice president of PFL, Professional Fighters Club, Fighters League. But anyway, he was at Fox at the time. Me and George go way back, still a good buddy to this day. But he, just the whole group at Fox Sports were engaged. And this is something that, people would say, well, now how did this come about? They kind of saw the traction. And this is going back to 2004. And I'm saying Fox. And when you look at the track record and the history and everything that goes with it, they wanted a taste of wrestling somehow, some way, even going back to then. They just knew that it got numbers, and how, it took them a long time, 20 years to really latch into SmackDown, and then they ended up putting it on the network. But anyway, that's another whole sidebar. I think Fox will get in the wrestling business again, but that's neither here nor there. But I do believe during this time, we strategically went into it and wanted to promote the pay-per-view. we can't point our fingers to it that, oh, it did this or did that, but it gave exposure. But TNA is a brand, was just not on the level of a UFC or a major boxing. And so the content that we created, look, it's creative is subjective, but it was, to me, very, very highly entertaining. The situation with Piper and Chris Rose, man, I wish I could remember all the different conversations, but I believe a mountain was made out of a molehill.
Hang on, let me give some context. Chris Rose is the host of the show.
Yep.
You've got other sports legends surrounding him, like John Kruk and John Sally, and then you've got a comedian, Tom Arnold. So that's sort of the layout, and they want these wrestling skits that are a part of the Best Damn Sports Show period to be just that, skits, the comic relief. Chris Rose, as he's supposedly helping promote the new TNA show, is wearing a t-shirt that says wrestling is fake. And he's constantly talking about how wrestling is fake. And it's written in the newsletters that you and Dutch Mantell were not happy with this at all. Do you remember being upset about the wrestling is fake angle? Did you know that that was going to be the angle they took? Or do you find out when you show up and he's wearing the shirt and this is what we're doing?
Connie, we're going to have to get maybe the Dutchman, maybe Borash. We need to recruit and do us a YouTube live on this, because was that storyline driven? I'm because Piper got the best of him.
It's written here, Mantell was frustrated by his own lack of input in the show, because what they wanted, a comedy show to put over their hosts, and what the company wanted, a good wrestling show to put over the product to a new audience, were often at odds. The Best Damn Sports Show people wrote it with TNA's input coming from Vince Russo, Jeremy Borash, Dave Sahadi, and Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, who was less negative about it, despite being a product of old school wrestling, was telling people at this point there's no such thing as bad publicity. Time has proven many times that not to be the case, but with a company that needs any exposure it can get, I think for his product, Jeff is correct. Is that the way you remember it?
Yeah, and because I've never, okay, well, on the wrestling is fake kind of stuff, it's like, I mean, when I was, my earliest memories, 5, 6, 7 years old, my grandmother, I mean, that, look, who hasn't heard that line? In that, what is the big deal if a host has that? The whole world thinks it, but let's entertain the hell out of them. Even at 2004, the toothpaste had been out of the tube a long time at that point. What, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, anyhow. But the collaboration, if you will, I knew going in, when me and George and kind of collectively agreed to do this, I said, there's going to be a yin and a yang here. They're going to want, it's their host. They're the ones, yes, getting paid the big bucks. They're the ones that flew in here, and in theory, they're doing us the favor. So we're going to have to bend, and we're not going to be happy. It's a business deal. Nobody, we weren't going to be happy with everything. And I can kind of remember having those conversations with multiple folks. And I'm like, hey man, at the end of the day, this is their show. We're not, it's not a TNA show. It's a Best Damn Sports Show period show. And so we got to make the best of the situation, regardless of what we may or may not think about their creative direction.
It just seems counterproductive. Like, I realize you're not WWE. You're still trying to eke out a profit. You're trying to plant some roots. You're trying to grow this thing. It would be hard for me to imagine WWE sending their talent to a show like, Jimmy Fallon or Conan O'Brien or whatever.
Any of them.
And they're just having the conversation. Well, wrestling's fake, right? I mean, it just feels like, wait, what are we doing? Like,
look, as we're having this, a few things coming back to me. If a wrestling fan is watching that, and I'm sure I would have voiced this to George, that's a turn off. If they want wrestling fans, and I've kind of said this so many different ways over and over and over, if you want to attract like true wrestling fans, don't insult their intelligence. Don't throw it in their face. Don't piss them off in that you are talking down to them. It's when you kind of get into, Oh gosh. I mean, Conrad, I don't want to step out of bounds here, but any religious talk, any political talk, any wrestling talk, when you kind of start talking down to folks in that aspect, I can envision me telling George, why do you want to piss off the wrestling fan that you're trying to attract? Regardless if Chris Rhodes thinks about that or not. If he really thinks that about wrestling, that's great. Do we really think that's best for this show? No.
I don't know if it's best for the show what your dad wrote in his book. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But first, I want to ask you real quick, Jeff, do your nuts stink? Did you just check right fast and let us know?
You know what? No sniff test tonight. I just jumped out of the shower, pal.
Hey, I know what you were using in there too. It's football season.
Silva, he's asleep.
Yes.
Will you take over duties here, pal? A little sniff.
Oh, what are we doing here? It's football season. It's time for oh God.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Look at this. Look at this.
Fantastic. Thanks to Mando.
Connie, how about that, pal? How about that 3-shot?
It's football season. It's time for tailgates, touchdowns, and Sunday cookouts with the crew. I can't believe this is real, but you got to find a way to have Mando be a part of your routine. If you're going to be spending time hooting and hollering, going to the games, climbing the stairs, maybe you're going to spend some time out in the yard. Maybe you're going to be working that grill. Maybe you're just going to get worked up. Maybe you're going to start early and spend all day working on your football dreams. Well, Mando is the MVP. It's been clinically proven to have 72-hour odor control, so it's perfect for those long days at the game or at the bar. It's safe for the whole body. Dave Silva's told me he puts it in his armpits. He puts it on his wiener. He puts it on his feet. He puts it everywhere in between. It stops odor before it starts, and it's available in 3 formats. Invisible spray. Sounds like something from a Marvel movie, but it's real with Mando. Solid stick and invisible cream. It comes in 4 quality cologne scents. There's bourbon leather. There's Mount Fuji, not Mr. Fuji, Mount Fuji, Pro Sport, and Clover Woods. I'm a big bourbon leather guy. I think you're going to love the way it smells. I encourage you to try it. This whole body deodorant is the real deal. It's seriously safe to use anywhere on your body, and we mean anywhere. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was just being misdiagnosed and mistreated. Well, we're stopping all that. Mando's whole body deodorant is tough, and it's tough enough for the most powerful odor, but gentle enough to use everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It's aluminum free, it's baking soda free, it's cruelty free, it's dye free, and you're going to be stink free. Go out of your way right now to check out Mando's starter pack. It's perfect for new customers, and it's even a great last minute stocking stuffer. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, the cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. I recommend the mini body wash and the deodorant wipes and free shipping. Luckily, I've got a discount code to get you hooked up with my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That's like 40% off the starter pack when you use the code MyWorld at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and let them know that we sent you. Don't let BO keep you on the bench. Smell better naked with Mando. Can you believe you just had Dave Silva smell his own nuts right here live at myworldpod.com?
Buddy, that was worth the entire podcast tonight. He did it. Did you notice he had 2 fingers up?
Well, that's the way you do it. Everybody knows that. You do 2 fingers.
You don't get not a 1 finger sniff test. He went, okay. Double.
A man his size, well, he wouldn't even feel 1 finger. Hey, let's talk about the book that your dad wrote, The Story of the Development of NWA TNA. It's one of 2 books that I read from your dad. I enjoyed both books, but this is really just sharing his journal, and we used it a lot in our early episodes here on the My World podcast. But this is around the time when that book comes out.
Oh.
And I wanted to know when you first read it, or I guess when you first heard he was doing it, if you read it, when you read it, and what your circle was saying about the book being released.
So when I first heard when he was, and I don't know that when he was journaling that he had made up his mind he was going to publish it. I think that came later. I may be wrong. But I knew just, and I don't want to say just because of our relationship was rocky during this time, but just kind of overall, I was living it. So I didn't have a lot of interest in reading it. It never interested me because believe me, I lived every second of it. And we would have philosophical discussions. We would have family discussions. We would have all kinds of discussion that went around it. It was a very, very challenging time for the father-son relationship. No matter how you slice it and dice it, working in the same family business is not easy, specifically wrestling, specifically the creative part of wrestling, because it is so subjective. And, thank God I had that experience because, one of the biggest takeaways, and even during this time, just because it worked in the past, it doesn't mean it's going to work today. But on the very flip side of that, the fundamentals of drawing money, I think when I've done my real due diligence and studied from the 60s to the modern day age, the fundamentals really haven't changed, but the avenues and mechanisms to get down to it. But Conrad, no, I didn't read it. And the only comments that I can probably recall would be, I don't think you're going to be happy with some of the stuff in that book. And I don't have anything specifically to point to. And my response would be, that doesn't surprise me.
This creates a conversation in the newsletters at the time about where the finances are with TNA. And it's written, their estimates and from sources in the company that they've lost more money in the 2+ years than ECW did in 7 years of running a full house show schedule, and that Smoky Mountain would have lost in 30 years at the rate they were losing money. Does that sound right to you?
No. And look, there would be times that my old man he just look from, I'd say not long after Panda came on board, he tapped out of really even a desire to be in the day to day. And like when we got Asylum up and running, he didn't even, I'm like, Dad, this is the soup to nuts. Everything we have going on is, I don't say well under 100 grand, but we ain't touching 100 grand every week. He's like, how the hell are you doing this? I'm like, well, if you really got in here and saw the DNA of everything, you would completely understand. And that would be including office rent and everything. And so just the finances part of that book, he just didn't have the context. And I don't know that anybody and I didn't get completely what you said about ECW, but who really knew the ECW finances?
Right.
And I'm not disputing it, but who really did know that? And then, the Smoky Mountain numbers, the investment and how they were running things and all that. It's a very, very hypothetical statements to be made. Even to this day, it still happens in every line of work, not just wrestling. Even the financial analysts will say this values this, and because they don't know. They just don't know.
Let's talk a little bit about the way the company felt on the way to this 3-hour pay-per-view debut known as Victory Road 2004. The Torch would say, regarding the upcoming pay-per-view, says one wrestler, quote, everybody's hopeful. That's the predominant feeling. Although there's always going to be second guessing, there's no more than usual right now. The boys are concerned with producing and earning a better spot. Do you remember there being some optimism and you could just feel the energy on the way to this 3-hour pay-per-view? It felt like a big deal. I know that when Paul Heyman gave that speech before Barely Legal that we all saw on Beyond the Mat, man, he had those ECW guys ready to run through a wall. It felt like, hey, we've arrived. We're on a pay-per-view. I know you guys have been on a pay-per-view, but now to know, hey, we've started television and now we've got a 3-hour pay-per-view. Did it feel like, hey, this is it? We made it. Do you remember the boys thinking that way?
And see, I've never been, and people that know me and been backstage, I've never been one for big rah-rah speeches, but I have been really big on not just being optimistic, but hey guys, think things through and see a victory. I'm not talking about a 1, 2, 3, but have the vision of a great pay-per-view and of a great match and digging down and have passion. So, I'm not trying to paint this big rosy picture, but if there's one kind of common thread that I believe from talent to office to production and even the fan base, I believe that in spite of the naysayers, if you will, there was a real little engine that could mentality that kept growing and kept growing and kept growing, that started in 2002, in my opinion, kept going till Hulk Hogan got on board. And I don't mean that out of disrespect, but everybody knew that's the day that the game has completely changed. At that time, they didn't know for better or worse, but it had changed. So but to me, the running thread and going from the weekly to the monthly, yes, Conrad, there was I think an extreme sense of let's go do this, guys. Let's go, show the wrestling fan base that we can put on a 3-hour pay-per-view that kicks ass.
Were you feeling the pressure to hit a certain number of pay-per-views? I mean, we heard the numbers that were bandied around earlier. Hey, if it's 10,000, if it's 12,000, if it's 20,000, if it's 30,000. Do you remember what your goal was? I know that when you were first getting going on weekly pay-per-views, you certainly had a number that you were hoping to hit. But now that we've reconciled what the realities are, since there is no more Jay Hossman, we've got a better relationship. We're on TV. We're excited about the 3-hour opportunity. Do you remember what the goal was? And do you remember what as long as it's not lower than blank? I mean, did it feel like there was a pressure to hit a minimum? So not just here's our goal, but we do not need it to go below this.
So I believe we were really striving and hoping to, now again, by this point, let me give a little context. The numbers and how the pay-per-view industry was just not set up for weekly. And so, the buys, you get a check every month. And so you're getting checks that, there when we got in the middle of it, we were getting money, and some of the pay-per-views could be 6 months old because of late payments and reconciling statements at individual cable companies and all that. So really trying to dial in, okay, our accounting is going to be done completely different and yada, 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 yada. But Conrad, I think the number we used in the early days, it might have inched up, but $29.95, so basically $30. I think we were using about a $12. That was what we were going to get. So 60-40, 50-50, and then you got to pay, or 40-40, what was it, 50-40-10 because in demand. Yeah, but anyway, I think we were using around $12 to be a little conservative. And I want to say that we were, because of the studio scenario and kind of looking at what's really gonna fit into the model that Panda had approved. I want to say 15 to 18, Conrad, but do not hold me to that. But I want to say 15 to 18, maybe 20. But at 20,000 buys, you can do the math right there, times 12. What kind of money we would have coming in?
I'm excited for us to actually talk about the pay-per-view, but what's interesting is you're going to be filming this Best Damn Sports Show period opportunity in advance of the pay-per-view. And these episodes are, of course, going to air after the pay-per-view. And it's in the Observer that you made the call. Let's not have any titles represented. So we're not spoiling any finishes. We're not going to be locked into anything. That seems like a lesson that you would have learned from observing what happened in Orlando at those WCW Disney tapings. Was that it, or was there something else?
In scheduling all this, and when I was looking at the research, Conrad, kind of the nightmare part of it, because we wanted, obviously, but post-production and Best Damn Sports Show, we would have loved to have had a show that, I'll call it, fit into our episodic nature. That wasn't happening. So it was all about, we'll call it brand building, if you will. But even though that was going to kind of be a stretch, and knowing that at the end of the day, it's their show, they're going to write it, they're going to do it in our studio, going to integrate our stars, but kind of leave it at that. It's not like we can advance storylines or anything like that. But yeah, so trying to have any of our talent appear as champions, it just didn't fit on any level.
Well, we're going to do this live here at myworldpod.com. We've been telling you it's your home for all things Jeff Jarrett, and to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell so you never miss it when we're live. And one of the bonuses of being live at myworldpod.com is we can take live fan questions.
How about that?
It doesn't really fit what we're doing right now, but I just got a question from Alex that we got to answer. From a worker's perspective, what is the difference between a WCW style match and a WWE style match? Famously, I've heard that referenced most when talking about the infamous Booker T Buff Bagwell match on Monday Night Raw. What is the difference between the two styles of the WWF and WCW from your perspective? I know the ropes are different. I know the sizes of the ring are different. Are there more differences that maybe we fans haven't recognized?
So what did you just say, Conrad? Because the ropes and the size of the ring, is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So those are two things that I would have never brought up. And I think, man, oh man, Conrad. Alex, first of all, awesome question. I appreciate you asking. And the reason being is that you could ask former WWF or guys that started in WWF and went to WCW, and then so their point of reference is, oh, I know what I just came from at WWF style matches, and I'm now in WCW in those style matches. But then if you have the WCW guys and go into WWF, there's a kind of a different mindset. So Conrad, I don't even know where to start because this could really get long-winded. So let me just be concise as possible. In the WWF, and look, obviously WCW closed and all that. So we're really talking about a 90s style mentality, which is heavily influenced by the product they generated, and it's coming from the 80s where they're enhancement matches. But when you had enhancement matches, 80s and early 90s, you did, we'll say, 3 to 5 things that were kind of your signature moves, if you will. And so the first parts of the match in WCW, the enhancement matches, you just went out and some guys had a different match. I'll just example, maybe a Bobby Eaton. He never had the same match. And, because he's a hell of a worker, and I'm not criticizing or complimenting. It's just the kind of the difference, the difference in how enhancement matches were looked at. The WWF and Vince and Pat and others, you got your signature moves over, and I'm not talking about just your finish, but a couple of signature moves over. And then when you got into your working with the other top talent or your opponent, you always integrated, I'm going to do some of my stuff and integrate your stuff in and kind of have that flow. And then when you got into the finishes, to say that the WWF had any much more storyline driven, I think that's the easiest way, but that's really not a knock on WCW. It's that they had much more of a professional wrestling finish, and WWF had a much more, I'll call it a sports entertainment finish, and a lot more dramatic pauses and a lot more, I don't want to say selling, but build, and it kind of built to a crescendo. And again, I know so many different people, Bruce, JR, all the, you name it, people that were heavily involved in WWF at the time. Pat Patterson had a very, very enormous influence on kind of going from, once it's time to go home, point A to point B to point C to point D, and you may even get into E, F, G, and H. Me and Scott, when we had our Hall series of matches, in the 90s, we had an A match, we had a B match, and we had a C match. And you would never have that at WCW. So I guess the sports, at the very top of it, it was sports entertainment versus professional wrestling. at its very core. Conrad, does that make sense, or ask me a question to kind of help clean that up?
Makes total sense. And so does Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. And then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even your stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know exactly what's going on in your metabolism, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on that morning's measurements. You can breathe into your Lumen before and after your workouts and even your meals, so you know what's going on in your body in real time. And here's why your metabolic health really matters. Think of your metabolism as almost like your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. So optimal metabolic health means you're going to have easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, even more focus. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each and every breath. So if you're ready to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go to lumen.me/myworld to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/myworld for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. And we thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's podcast. So listen, man, we know we're getting ready for the big pay-per-view here, and we've got some news and notes about Spanky. It's written here in the Observer, Spanky probably won't get a major push. It's the real-life Brian Kendrick, keeping score at home, because 0-1 is going to remain his priority on dates, and they don't push guys who don't give up their Japanese deals. We should talk about that because you've had guys from New Japan and All Japan and Noah and 0-1 and even Big Japan in the early days of TNA. Was that a decision you had to make? Like, hey, if their priority is Japan, we're not going to be able to use them every show. So, you know, if we're not priority for you, you can't be priority for us. Is that pretty much it?
But I tried to, and you can go back and kind of just look at our history. I tried to be as upfront as possible and drill in and say, look, on the Asylum days, it's 1 day a week. Then when we got TV, it's 2 days a week and a monthly pay-per-view. So at the very most, 9 shows a month. And anybody that had a potential Japan deal, a current one coming up, I said, hey man, let's just get on the same page. If you want or need or what, just tell me. If Japan's your priority, I'm not saying I'm not going to use you, but you have to kind of understand that the guys that are committing and making us priority 1 and Japan priority 2 versus vice versa, that's just common business sense. And everybody really, I think both sides appreciated just the honesty, and I got it. So there were some guys that like, no, I'm going to make more money, or I want to really blow my career up over there, and I just don't think I can do it here. I'm like, I get it. Total honest conversation.
We're going to have an honest conversation about the pay-per-view now. We're finally here, Victory Road 2004. When you take a look at the Observer recap, the show got 57.7% thumbs up, 24.5% thumbs in the middle, and only 17.9% thumbs down. It was pretty close on the best match poll. AJ Styles and Petey Williams comes in first place. The X Division Gauntlet comes in second place. And you and Jeff Hardy come in third place. The minis match is a runaway for the worst match. When you first think about Victory Road 2004, without looking at research, without Google, just off the top of your head, what is your core memory of that show?
Jeff Hardy won't use the big ass ladder.
Okay.
I mean, I like how you set that up, but immediately I've yes, over and over and over. When I see that poster, I still think of that big ass ladder. And he's like, yeah, we're going to do this and that. And I'm like, damn, okay. Yeah.
You've teased us before a little bit and given us some conversation when we talked about Jeff before. But now that we're finally here at that pay-per-view, sort of lay out that story of having that conversation. Of course, in the main event, it's going to be Jeff Jarrett, Double J, and Jeff Hardy. But I want to hear from you more context about this big ass ladder.
I mean, other than, look, going into a monthly pay-per-view and where Jeff was at in his career, and I don't remember word for word the conversations and me having the conversations before we got here that night, but it's, hey man, if Jeff Hardy's in the main event, they're going to expect a Jeff Hardy match or a Jeff Hardy spot, or they want to see Jeff Hardy, and he couldn't agree more. And so as the conversations got going through the weeks in the build up for it, he gave us the old, hey man, would it be possible to get a ladder bigger than an 8-foot ladder? Yeah, let's go to work on that. And you got to get a double-sided and all that. And then, how big do you want it, Jeff? Oh, I want it big. And so when you go from 8 to 10, that's big. You go from 8 to 12, Conrad, you don't really realize, like, all right, that's a big ass ladder. But that's, when you look, and I have been very fortunate to be around the best of the best of the best. And, I've just kind of learned through the years, some guys are just wired differently. Jeff's one of them. He Daredevil would be, look, you can kind of come up with all kind of descriptors for different talent, but the charismatic enigma, but no, the mindset and the connection that Jeff has with the audience. I just think that uniqueness that he always brought to the table, that you couldn't quite put your finger on it. And that, yes, he's got a unique look, and, his work skills and his promo skills, and we could come up with 4 or 5 different things here, and the Daredevil skills and psychology and all that. But Jeff, to me, is one of those guys. I remember having the conversation. We talked about my dad a couple of times during this episode. It was me. You might like this, Conrad. It was me, my dad, and Jimmy Hart, and we were having lunch or something, and Jimmy was saying, Jerry, you used to tell me, and he would go through a Memphis story and a Memphis story and Memphis story, because Dad was trying to get into, tell me about Jeff Hardy and just different things. And this is before this pay-per-view, but Jimmy just kind of rolled out and he said, Jerry, you taught me this, so I'll just kind of throw it back at you. Some guys just got that it factor. And that was, and I remember kind of jumping on that. I'm like, yep, Dad, Jimmy's right. You can't really describe Jeff's connection or drawing ability or anything like that, other than say he's got an it factor that you just don't come across very often at all when you're dealing with talent that can draw money.
I want to ask you about the big story from my perspective. I know your first memory is about the big ass ladder. Mine is about Randy Savage. We haven't seen Randy Savage on a pay-per-view in forever at this point. I mean, he left WCW months before it was over. So I think we're going to be around 4 years since we've really seen him. And from what I understand, this is a last-minute deal that's put together. I guess what you guys were working on with Sting, those negotiations had fallen through, and Randy Savage is going to come in. And I remember at the time feeling like Randy was old. And now I look back and I think he was only 52. And there's a lot of great wrestlers in wrestling today who are older than 52. I won't name any names, but I'm really good friends with one of them. And I mean, seriously, he takes his shirt off and he looks better than he was in his 20s. Now, Randy here is going to be covered head to toe. I mean, he's going to come in dressed like a damn ninja. I mean, there he is right there, just all black. I mean, you can kind of see that's Randy, but not really. But this is kind of a weird deal because he's going to come in as a post-match angle, if you will, for the main event. And it's quite a visual. Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and now Randy Savage. It feels like he's here. And then we find out that he quits the company just 2 days later. He's going to say that this is an unsafe working environment and he's out of here. And I guess his feelings were hurt, and I'm not saying that in an ugly way, that when he showed up, Hulk Hogan was there. Or at least that's what's written here. There's a claim that Hulk Hogan was negotiating with Jerry Jarrett. Your dad was trying to reel the big fish in. I know you've tried before, but now we're trying again. This time your dad gets him to come to the building. And allegedly they're negotiating that same day. Jerry, Bob Carter, and the real life Terry Bollea. Do you remember Hulk Hogan being at this show?
I wish okay, so and you'd get 15 different answers even if everybody got at the table, because Dutch and Vince and myself and Borash and Dixie and Bob Carter and all that. But we knew, look, Randy, and we've gone into great detail on this show about my father's relationship with Randy Savage. And look, I worked with Randy in the WWF and WCW, but him and my old man's relationship goes really deep. And I think the best way, we've talked about this, two guys that were really at war with each other with super, super tensions that came together, and he had that run in Memphis. And then, he gets the call and Vince McMahon wants you to come work for him. And he went to my old man and said, "Hey, I'm going to Vince. I don't know how you feel about it. What do you want me to do? I'll stay here literally and work. If it's 2 weeks, if it's a month, if it's 6 weeks, I'm going to work till you don't want me anymore," kind of in a reasonable scenario, because he had so much respect for my father. And so they did the loser leave town, and then he went off. But him and my dad always had that tight relationship. Us going all in and doing the monthly pay-per-views and getting Hall and Nash on board and me and Hardy in the main event, we wanted to shake up the bushes and get as much buzz, if you will. And we wanted to leave a cliffhanger because we're coming back the following month with the next monthly pay-per-view. And how do you kind of throw a hook into something that makes sense and has a buzz and everything that went with this? So Randy was that what was that guy? Well, you don't really understand how good or bad a relationship is until that didn't go quite as rosy, because Hogan offered, the best of my recollection is, "Hey, Jerry, we're talking, and I don't know if it's going to be the December or into January, into February and March." And, and my old man and others knew, okay, he can be playing us to get a better deal for Vince. But
Again,
yes. But who cares? If he wants to show up, and that's okay, not really knowing where Randy and Hulk's relationship, that I think only those two guys know. Matter of fact, I'm positive that I don't think anybody really, really knows, because we'll call them the mega powers, the amount of money they drew, their business relationship. Obviously, when you work that tight with somebody through the years and then form the personal relationship, and then where both of their lives headed. But, we're talking end of 2004, their relationship was not very good or horrible. Again, we didn't really know the depths of it, but the result of Hogan saying, I'm in Tampa, you guys are in Orlando, I'll drive over. And I don't know if Hogan knows best where all that was at the time, but look, Hogan was shaking and moving and just wanting to keep a buzz, if you will. And we didn't mind that. We just didn't foresee Randy going, "F this, I'm out."
Hogan Knows Best was about 9 hours or 9 months away from debuting. So they were probably at least in discussions about doing the show. Maybe they had dates. It does make sense that he might have thought, hey, this would be a nice way to get some crossover and things like that. I know you've tried before, when your dad's taking a stab at it and he gives you a call and says, "Hey, I got Terry to come to the show." Were you shocked?
See, Conrad, I wish I could tell you. My gut tells me, my memory tells me that we didn't realize he was just going to drive over. That was like a last minute deal. "Hey, I'll just drive over." Oh, okay. It was, and it's hard for our listeners to kind of go back in time because just of where the industry was. Vince bought the competition. WCW went away. There was really nothing on the horizon for a few years from March of 01, and now we are here we are November of 04, and having a Hall and Nash big, having a Jeff Hardy, a monthly pay-per-view. We weren't anything to write home about, but we were a international company that was doing their first pay-per-view. So rightfully there was a buzz, if you will, probably more industry inside as opposed to mainstream, but there was a buzz. And so, Bob Carter, I don't know exactly what went down, but it was a last minute deal. There was no big plans for Hulk to come over and for us to have this big roundtable discussion. We came to produce the show that weekend.
Here's what's written. Hogan being there created a backstage issue with Savage there. Well, let me back it up. Hogan claiming to be fresh off of a meeting the day before with Vince McMahon.
There we go. There we go.
Came to the pay-per-view and negotiated at length with Jarrett and talked with many of the wrestlers as well as the TNA owner, Bob Carter. Hogan expressed an interest in coming in, but wanted to have the final say-so in creative, basically taking Jeff Jarrett's power position, although perhaps not in public name. Let's time out right there. Do you remember creative control being a sticking point for the Hulkster?
I mean, from day one, at this stage of, we'll call it post NWO, Hogan's not going to, look, the whole lawsuit of Bash at the Beach was over creative control. So whatever deal was going to be discussed before pen to paper was going to go down, we were going to agree on, here's, it wasn't like he was coming in going to be a member of the roster and work 26 TVs. It was, any discussion was build to a pay-per-view. Let's see how the pay-per-view does, and we'll go from there. He wasn't going to give us an option, although we may or may not want one, but it was going to be very cut and dried. It was almost without saying, Hulk, let's figure out creatively on the front end, as opposed to the back end, what you want to do. And if we can come to terms, we'll do it.
Let me ask you about Bob Carter here for a minute. He is obviously not as well versed in wrestling as you or Dutch or Jerry or any of those folks, but everybody knows the name Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
How excited at the opportunity to have Hulk Hogan was Bob Carter?
On a scale of 1 to 10,
that'd be great.
Probably an 8 or a 9. A guy that Bob, again, there were so many things written that I used to smile and chuckle out and then like, man, that ain't cool. But, Bob, the chairman of Panda Energy International. Bob, a wildcatter that came up the hard way. Bob was not a wealthy man by any standards, to my understanding, in his 40s. I think he started making money in his 50s, but now here we are. He had made a lot of money in the energy business. And so he ran Panda and all of his other ventures, Black ink versus red ink. What are we going to do here? So at this point, we're 2.5 years into the investment, and we had brought him options, but it goes without saying, just what you said. Hey, Hulk Hogan is the guy that was on front of Sports Illustrated. Hulk Hogan was the guy that was on The Tonight Show. And Hulk Hogan was, everybody knew Hulk, especially by 2004. And that, man, if I can get him part of this brand, it may be the accelerator that investment needs that you get multiples much quicker than you expected.
I just find it interesting and fascinating, what that dynamic must have looked like. But here's what's written in the newsletters of the time. Hogan being there created a backstage issue with Savage there. Savage was furious Hogan was there, feeling the company had double-crossed him. Savage hates Hogan to the point he spent a year running all over the country knocking Hogan, wrote a song calling Hogan a chicken, and even did a grandstand challenge for a $50,000 shoot fight for a children's charity in Tampa. Hogan, who like McMahon, understands there's a thin line between hate and love, particularly when you can make money with someone you hate, tried to be nice even after everything Savage had said publicly about him. Both brought in street fighters with them, as Savage came to the building with Brian Adams and Hogan came with Brian Knobs. From several sources, Hogan went to him and spoke first, saying, "I want to smooth things out," and words along the lines of, "I love you, brother," or "we can make money together," according to another. Savage responded with a flippant remark and refused to shake Hogan's hand. There are disputes about this next line, but some have said Hogan said if Savage felt that way, they could step outside and settle it. And Savage immediately backed down. Others said that Hogan didn't say that, but he was instead trying in every way to smooth things over, and Savage was just being a total asshole about it, and he blew Hogan off and walked away. But then 2 days later, Savage canceled appearing on the TV show, claiming it was because Hogan was threatening him, which is a joke, and that TNA provided him with an unsafe working environment. It's clear Savage never had any intention of wrestling and used Hogan as his excuse. When Savage came, he was wearing a huge jacket to hide his physique and sweating like crazy. He never even took the jacket off. Savage, when he's juiced up and in shape, always wears sleeveless t-shirts in public like Hogan. So everyone assumed he was small and not in shape, as he lost a lot of weight in the last year or two, after he'd gotten up to about 260 pounds of muscle after leaving wrestling. The feeling is that Savage was taking the believed to be $25,000 one-night payoff and would string them along before coming up with an excuse when it comes time to pay off the angle in the ring. The same game he pulled on Andrew McManus 2 years ago. Still, TNA made the crucial mistake of putting him on the air without a signed contract, relying on his verbal commitment to wrestle on the next pay-per-view. And after what happened with Hogan, you'd think they would have learned. So we'll stop right there. What do you remember hearing about this Hogan-Savage backstage confrontation, if you will?
All post pay-per-view. Got to remember, I'm dealing with, again, the very first pay-per-view, 3-hour pay-per-view. So Keith Mitchell and his team in the truck, and then obviously, whatever packages are coming down from Nashville to be integrated into the pay-per-view, and then the matches that are outside of mine that I would, are probably going to have to make a few calls and discuss. It just goes with the territory. You got to deal with a little bit of everything. Conrad, I had no idea of the depths and any of this confrontation or supposed confrontation. It was like, "Hey, Dad, I didn't even tell him to handle it. He was already handling it. It didn't come across my desk. Not that I had a desk down there, but it didn't come across mine at all. I'm dealing with, we've already gone through kind of the challenges of Jeff Hardy and prior to getting him to the pay-per-view. Conrad, I had no idea. I learned about it after the show and the days to come, and it was a lot of disappointment. And you probably know exactly where my mind went was, okay, what's Bob Carter think about this mess? Or is he aware of it? Or how is he digesting that? Or what really happened? What's his takeaway? All that kind of stuff. Because again, a huge night, and to have two guys that aren't really an integral part of the show. One's not even a part of the show. As big of legends as they are and their status and all that, it wasn't good for business for any of us to be distracted. And I mean any of us to be distracted going into this night.
Instagram, a wrestling historian, is with us here live tonight at myworldpod.com. And he agrees, or he's sharing with us the Pro Wrestling Insider report from Mike Johnson at the time. So it backs up one of these theories. Quote, Hogan offered to step outside so they could settle their differences after Savage had been talking trash about him. The Macho Man ignored his challenge and walked off. Man, I hate the way that reads because I just love the Macho Man, and I know you do too. And we can't pretend to know what was really going on in that relationship. But I mean, the guy we know who was fighting police dogs at the Waffle House in Middle Tennessee, it's hard for me to imagine he didn't want to step outside with Hulk Hogan here.
Now, I mean, if you ask me, my perspective, and look, it's an eyewitness report that talked to an eyewitness report. I mean, by the time it got to print, my gut, but my thought is Randy came as a favor to Jeff, to Jerry, I'll say, and Jeff Jarrett, but he came as a favor to the Jarretts, and let me step out at the end of this pay-per-view and let's see if, we quasi agreed, hey, we can do this and we can build to this 6-man. So whatever the agreement was, that's what we're going to do and be all professional about it. And then, Hogan showing up unannounced or I'll say unannounced to Randy, he immediately is going to be thinking like any wrestler, but you have to almost amp this up. All right, did Jerry know he was coming? Did Jerry just double cross me? All right, so now Bob Carter, if I'm going to negotiate or try to be a part of this brand, did Bob Carter, is he behind? It just threw a monkey wrench in everything. And look, at the end of the day, you have to look at Hogan knew what he was doing, but he also could have said, man, it's an opportunity for maybe, and I don't want to say make amends, but maybe I can talk to Randy in this kind of wrestling setting and say, hey, let's go make money with this. And maybe TNA is the place to make money, because I don't, in Hulk's mind, I don't see me making money with Jarrett or Hardy or, maybe Hall and Nash can be. I don't know. I don't know what the thought was. It was just bad timing. It was what it was.
Does that number sound right, that you guys would have paid Randy $25,000 for that appearance on the pay-per-view?
Hell no.
It's hard for me to imagine that would have been the number.
Yeah, it was anything that killed us.
I know for sure that I shouldn't say I know for sure. All the newsletters were saying that it was Jerry who was in touch with Hogan. Were you the contact on Savage, or did somebody else handle that for you guys?
To me, and it depended on what iteration, we were both contacts, but depending upon the situation. In this set of circumstances, yes. When did the rap album come out?
Randy? Before.
Yeah. So post that rap album, I would have thought I would have been the lead on Randy. And creatively speaking, we're going to set up a 6-man. My gut tells me I was the lead on Randy and my dad was the lead on Hulk. And
the album came out the year before, so that whole "Be a Man" Hulk song was only a year old at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh almighty.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about what's written here. You put him on TV, and you didn't have a signed contract, and of course, the newsletters are wagging their finger at you, saying you should have known better. You should have learned with Hogan when he did it to you. Do you remember this feeling like a fool me once, fool me twice, or because the investment wasn't significant, it wasn't that big a deal?
Wasn't that big a deal. And look, we never, creatively, it's not like we overcommitted on anything. It was, again, just such a different era in professional wrestling to me, that we were wanting to, again, pre-YouTube, pre-X, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, just create some buzz, knowing we got 30 days, but most importantly, 4 TVs to tell whatever story we needed to tell, with or without Randy. So having him on the pay-per-view, what was the real downside? It's not like he was beating up a bunch of heels. He just walked out at the end.
Well, maybe you should have had some Magic Spoon. I know Randy Savage was covering his whole body up there. My man needed to start his day with some protein. And if you're already a Magic Spoon fan, I've got some big news. Magic Spoon has turned their super popular cereal into high protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like the classic crunchy cereal bars you grew up on. And here's the deal. Every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, so you can feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's so many more. Magic Spoon's brand new treats are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. And now, for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores, and with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. I double dog dare you to try that double chocolate. I love it so much, I just reloaded. My pantry's stocked, and yours will be too. Jeff's even said he keeps these in the Tahoe, so he's not tempted to grab a piece of junk food while he's making his honeydew errands. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/myworld. Or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/myworld for $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream.
Conrad, Magic Spoon is fantastic, but I've got a bone to pick with you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Do you realize Dice Man is here?
Oh, is he really? How about that? Yeah, I see that. One of our favorite follows over on Twitter. He's with us here live at myworldpod.com.
He's got
Randy Savage attacked Hawk at a Kid Rock concert only 3 years before this. I don't know if I'm buying Randy backing down even at that stage of the game. See, that makes more sense.
Neither, Dice Man. I'm not. Hell no. But I do think Randy. Look, we're all crazy. It just depends on what flavor and what time of day. But Randy respected business more than anything. He would have never. I just don't think he would have, unless something really went down. He wouldn't have gotten a fight on Universal Studios back, like out of respect for my old man. It just Kid Rock concert, better walk out. Watch out, Hawkster. But here, no, but he ain't backing down.
It's just such a crazy sentence. Listen, we got to talk about how you guys cover this up. I mean, you have a cliffhanger here with Randy Savage at the end of the show, and you've got a set of TV tapings just a couple of days later. So you come out and do a promo on TV where you're claiming that you, Hall, and Nash, you guys are the kings of wrestling, and you've left Randy Savage laying in a pool of his own blood after the pay-per-view. That's your way of sort of putting a button on everything. But this is when it's going to get interesting, because for that particular taping, after the pay-per-view we're about to discuss, you've promoted Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Diamond Dallas Page, and Randy Savage, a lot of new stars on this set of tapings, and you only draw 400 people to a free show. I mean, this has got to be frustrating. I mean, is this around the time where I know you're excited about the opportunity of having a more efficient way to do television because you're in a soundstage? I know you're thrilled to have the opportunity to be on Fox Sports Net and to even have an opportunity to be on Best Damn Sports Show, period. These are great things. But when you see Damn Nation, 400 people showing up to the tapings, and it's a free show, it's got to be frustrating, right, Jeff?
Well, yeah, for sure. Sure. But let's give a little context here. November, and man, as you know, we were just there for Cody's 18th birthday, but walking through the parks. And in 2004 at Universal Studios, that is pre-Harry Potter. And I say that Harry Potter fundamentally changed the finances of those parks, Conrad. And I was there pre-Harry Potter and post-Harry Potter and the growth. But anyway, in November, parks are down. And we're talking about promoting a show with no revenue, no paid tickets. And so you have to get into park literature and park marketing materials. And a Sunday is a lot different than a tapings. I'll just say they were challenges, and it took us about a year to kind of figure that out. Once we got the studio and knew how to message, and we built up our, we did build up our core, but we figured out how to message both park guests as well. And internally, there were many times, and I'm talking about this event, where we had to have, and I don't know what the percentage was, X amount of park guests in the arena. Okay. That was because it was a park attraction. And that was kind of the deal we signed, that it can't be all outsiders. That I'll call it, my question and conversations with Universal Studios folks is, all right, you mean to tell me that if X amount of wrestling fans show up, walk through City Park, get in the queue, get in the line to come into the arena, that somebody in the park who happens to be from wherever, Kansas, and they're down here on a family vacation, and they're stumbled upon, hey, there's wrestling here tonight. You mean they're going to get in before a diehard wrestling fan? Yeah, that is the answer. That because we made an agreement that X amount of fans will always be let in above wrestling fans. Now, on this particular night, growing Sunday, it was our first Sunday. Obviously, we weren't happy with it, but we knew it was going to be a challenge. Again, we're going to have to throw marketing dollars on a limited budget, and no, we're not going to get that return. because you can't sell tickets. It's changed now, but in those days you could not sell tickets, and it was a mess, Conrad, but we finally got all that worked out. But yeah, only having 400 people show up was not a great feeling, but it didn't, I don't think it really slowed down the momentum at all of the show.
Well, let's talk about the show because it's going to blow away expectations based on buy rate. Here's what's written. Based on our response level, the show should blow away our estimate of 3,000 buys, and I'd in fact expect it to be well over the 30,000 mark. This is the best response we've gotten to a TNA pay-per-view since the very first night, and there have been TNA shows that have done 25,000 buys in the past. So it is a glowing review. You've got 700 fans in the building. You're turning many fans away. I mean, just 2 days prior to this, there were only 375 tickets out. So there are going to be some freebies, but there's a lot of last minute interest here. How much of that do you attribute to the buzz about the new talent that's coming in?
You're talking about the live audience, 375?
Yep.
See, and that's, I don't, and I may be wrong, but you could not sell a ticket and you could not give a voucher. That was, Conrad, when I tell you the challenges we had at that studio, kind of figuring the DNA of that, you could not give it was first come, first serve. And, you know, that you had signs out in the middle of the park for, you know, TNA wrestling, pay-per-view starts tonight, all this. But you would say have to be in this line, but you literally first come, first serve, you got in, and we had our regulars that we call them regulars, the folks that were not part guests. But there was a buzz. I mean, there was a buzz, but still it was a challenge to kind of figure out that audience. Nowadays, fantastic. You can take it at an event down there. But in these days, it was all a park attraction first priority.
Let's talk about some of the matches. We've got Hector Garza winning a 20-man X Division International Invitational Gauntlet. He's going to win a shiny new trophy here. The order of entry, number 1, who else? Frankie Kazarian.
Ooh, there's my man.
Then Sanjay Dutt, who's going to be eliminated by Alex Shelley. Puma, who here is going to be eliminated by Shane and Kazarian. L.A. Park, who's going to be eliminated by Kazarian. Jarrell Clark, eliminated by Shane and Kazarian. Sonny Siaki. Oh, I'm sorry. Miyamoto, who's also eliminated by Shane and Kazarian. Michael Shane, who's eliminated by Spanky. Hector Garza, of course, won. Nasawa, he's eliminated by Siaki. Mikey Batts is eliminated by Garza. Alex Shelley is eliminated by Cross. Matt Seidel is eliminated by Shelley. Sonny Siaki is eliminated by Chris Sabin and Spanky. Jason Cross is eliminated by Psychosis. Shark Boy is eliminated by Siaki. Psychosis is eliminated by Red. I mean, I can't believe this is real. D-Ray 3000, my man, he's eliminated by Siaki. Amazing Red in at 18. 19 is Spanky. He's going to be eliminated by Sabin. Chris Sabin is number 20, and he's ultimately eliminated by Hector Garza. It's a crazy match. It's a great match, start to finish, and it's even written there's nothing that could follow it. Really, really well received as an opener. I guess this is important, you know, on the first 3-hour pay-per-view. Man, let's throw as much total nonstop action at them as we can. What better than the X Division, right?
Bingo. You just said it. Hey guys, we're coming on the air. We had luchadors, and I think that was it was such a priority for me. You know, you just saw L.A. Park and Garza and others, but guys, Kazarian, man, that just you naming off the names, Amazing Red, just a lot of fond memories. But we wanted to come out of the gate with what you just said, truly total nonstop action. And those guys always delivered. And you could, you know, there's a lot of different ways to start the show, and you can't start the show with this kind of action every episode. But on the first one, it was almost, in my mind, a mandate, a no-brainer.
I know that we say a lot of times here on the show that timing is everything, but how far ahead of time was this roster? I mean, the folks I just ran through, I mean, they would be a main roster on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday right now, would they not?
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, I've, as we've rolled along the last couple of years doing the pod, when I kind of look back on and not just the top of the roster. I'm talking about for the entirety of that run. Again, I go back to 09, 02 to about 2010. My goodness, man, I was incredibly blessed with awesome talent. They could go, they could work TV, their effort, they cared, they really cared about the product, and they just always delivered.
You're going to see some sponsorship here on this pay-per-view for a video game called Backyard Wrestling 2. Now, of course, we know that backyard wrestling has been something that was heavily criticized in the 90s and early 2000s. And now there's a video game about it, and they're advertising on a wrestling pay-per-view. I'm sure that is a home run opportunity for them. Was there anybody inside the office of TNA who was like, oh, God, I know we want the money, but do we have to do a backyard wrestling sponsor?
I think they brought it to me and the creative team with some kid gloves, and we're trying to kind of get a feeling like, are we going to get a lot of pushback? And Conrad, I'm like, it creates revenue. I totally understand why they're coming to our product to advertise it. And look, well, Conrad, let me ask you, I don't want to get down into a rabbit hole. Yes. What is your thoughts of backyard wrestling?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think I would want to promote it on my television wrestling. I mean, I know you said that there's no such thing as bad publicity, so I get that. But and I know that, hey, we'd love to have the sponsorship. I really do understand that too. But it just feels like it's borrowing trouble to me.
Okay, here was kind of my thought always. And when you kind of see different stories and look, the Bucks talk. I mean, I always looked at kind of backyard wrestling is, in the music industry, not everybody can start out playing clubs. Some folks legitimately start playing out in dive bars or garage bands. It's like, do you really call that music? What we used to do in the garage? Well, yeah, it was not good. Matter of fact, it was the shits, but it's kind of how we got our start. And I've kind of always looked at backyard wrestling that way, in that it kind of is what it is. Now, the safety stuff, to me, when I see some of the stuff, and Conrad, we'll trade videos, I just go, my God, you can't stop people from wanting to hurt themselves. But those are the kind of things that, hey, man, I really wish you wouldn't do that for your own personal health, because that's can be hell, it can cost you your life.
I mean, to your point, backyard wrestling, the way probably the Young Bucks were doing it, is not all that different from the backyard wrestling that Hermie Sadler and Cody Angle do in your pool.
Bingo.
But all of a sudden, if old Hermie said, all right, Cody, today's the day, and he's got a couple of light tubes, I feel like Mama Jarrett's going to say, now hang on now. We're not doing that.
Well, trust me, in that big brawl, there was a couple of things that Karen had to look at Cody and say, nope, I'm the commissioner tonight. That ain't happening.
Well, something else that ain't happening is we're never going to beat Kid Cash promos. I have a guilty pleasure for Kid Cash. I think everything he does is hilarious, whether it's intentional or not. I'm a fan. And he does a promo on this pay-per-view where he's talking to Scott Hudson, and he refers to Scott Hudson as Scotty Not So Hottie, which I think is one of the greatest things I've ever heard. My God, Scotty Not So Hottie. Match 2 is the Empire Saint and Johnny B. Bad and Ron Killings and Eric Watts. What? Yeah, it's November. It sounds like a crazy Survivor Series match. They're going to take on the Naturals, Kid Cash and Dallas, who we know as Lance Hoyt these days. Johnny B. Bad is here on the pay-per-view, sans mustache. What'd you think of Johnny B. Bad back in TNA? I mean, what a look that is.
Oh, I mean, I love Mark's a genuinely awesome dude. And again, I think this was building to a local Orlando disc jockey. Russ Rollins and Mark were best of friends, and Dusty was going to be involved, and myself, and we were building toward a kind of a local angle. Again, this kind of actually fits into this episode, in that Russ was a huge supporter, did us a ton of good, but it was creating an awareness. I did his show multiple times, and it was about, hey, TNA Wrestling, we're over at Orlando Universal Studios backlot. We're there every other week or whatever our schedule was. Again, creating that awareness that we were in town, because promoting a show that couldn't sell tickets, that was really a slippery slope in a lot of ways on how much money we were going to allocate to marketing it, knowing that Universal also was using their marketing dollars, but that was toward park guests because they wanted wrestling fans to buy a ticket to come in the park and get to see wrestling. So it was a challenge. We figured it out.
The Empire Saint is Irish Pat Kenny or Simon Diamond, depending on when you were a big fan. Me too. So Johnny B. Bad, Ron Killings, and Eric Watts, they get the win here. But outside, we see Shane Douglas trying to peep into this large white limousine. This is the second time we've seen this. We saw the limousine at the start of the show. Shane Douglas is a talking head. He's a backstage interviewer here, if you will. And he's trying to figure out what in the heck is going on with this limousine. Were you saying that Shane was great at this?
You know what? I don't think I don't know that he was ever the biggest fan of doing it, just because of his wrestling career. But man, when he was on, he brought a sense of that former, like football players,
credibility,
just the credibility, but how he would articulate and get the question out. But he was so good that he could almost lead the witness, if you will.
Yeah, he's taking care of the guys.
Buddy, he was fantastic at it.
And really, if you ask old timers, they would say that was the magic of Mean Gene. That on some level, Mean Gene's going to do all the heavy lifting. You just got to stand there and grunt.
I mean, we could do a whole episode. You take Mean Gene out of the WWF and all those famous Hulk promos, Savage promos, Warrior promos, just how he set the table before talent said anything. Just an incredible talent that sold a boatload of tickets. Lance Russell in Memphis. Now, did Lance translate into but for Memphis and how he was set up in the formative years and everything, it was Lance could take a young talent and do 80% of the talking, but that 20% that talent did, if my old man or Lawler just kind of gave them just a generality, they helped sell tickets for that Monday night. And you'd have to really credit Lance for it.
Next up, we're going to see a night vision camera in Abyss's lair. We're also being told that Raven and Monty Brown are in different layers. Apparently, these three monsters have been without water, food, or light for 24 hours. It's a little silly.
Yep.
Is this a Dutch Mantelism or a Vince Russoism, or what is this?
We've covered that. Man, if I put it on either one, they're going to get mad probably. No. Gosh, we ought to get old Abby to I almost think it's a Dutchism.
I believe that.
I do. I almost think it's a Dutch announcer line. Hey, throw this in there, knowing that, okay, we can get away from it if we don't like it. But I kind of feel it's a Dutch line.
Next up, we've got a little person match. And unfortunately, I guess Puppet was beaten off in the trash can because he's not here.
Who's the mini match?
Masquerita Sagrada and Pirata Morgan. It's a classic battle of a mini pirate and a little mask guy. Pirate Man with the eye patch here is 80 kilos, which is 175 pounds. What do you think of this look, man?
Stout little fella.
I mean, it looks like, I think he's running our graphics right now on the live show here.
Oh, you're going to beg him to pull up a 3-shot. How do you say pirata?
Next year for Halloween, I think that should be Silva's costume. Let's show it again. Don't you think that? I think Silva could pull that look off.
Hell yes.
Piratita.
Yes.
That's the way we'd say it in Alabama, just because I wanted to say that. Silva. I think we need that next year.
You know, Conrad, if we have anybody in the ad-free social media department that may or may not be listening to this, or you may or may not have a relationship, I think it would be a wonderful kind of post that you just kind of did a side by side.
Oh, I think we can make that happen. I think we could even Photoshop his headwear on top of Dave Silva's face and include it in today's show graphic.
You don't say.
Just created a little extra work that I'm going to get MF for, but I mean, I think it would really hit. Hey, Masquerita Sagrada, for those of you who aren't familiar, you've probably seen some of his work in the WWF before. I mean, this is a big time performer. I mean, I know that we're saying he's small in stature, but I'm saying he is a big star. And a lot of people kind of regard him. I mean, this is a terrible comparison because there is no comparison to who I'm about to say. But much like Rey Mysterio was a force in the cruiserweight division in WCW, when it came to minis, Masquerita Sagrada was held in the highest of regards, right?
It's subjective, but for my money, during this time frame, he was the number one mini in the world and a very, very distant second. He needed a great base, but that guy, he just did things athletically that the other minis couldn't even come close to doing.
Why don't you think he was a bigger star for TNA? I mean, it feels like he got over everywhere he went. Every time you brought him in, fans were digging it. It just never really, he never became the star that I kind of expected him to be.
So there has been discussions in this very house, Conrad, downstairs, kind of about, we knew for the most part that the minis didn't really hit. And when I say minis, okay, Puppet, Puppet, those guys, Puppet and T.O. and some others, you didn't really look at them as lucha minis. But the minis in TNA never really hit. Like, you go to Mexico and see a minis match, and sometimes they'll have the best response of the night, or right up there, and oohs and ahs and pops and all that. But because I think we had unbelievable talent that at this time was really brand new on a that Canadian Destroyer and different moves guys were pulling out, had been the first time. So when you had the X division, it kind of diminished what the minis did. In a way, they would rather see the X division because it never really ever hit like it did in Mexico.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next. We see Scott Hudson backstage with the 3 Live crew, and BG James is promising to take the Canadians back to school. Scott Hall's here in a white tracksuit. This is a crazy look. It's written here. Scott Hall, whose dye job puts Bischoffs to shame, says Big Sexy won't be here tonight. We've got 3 Live crew here, Conan and BG James, taking on Team Canada. That's Eric Young and Bobby Roode alongside Coach Scott D'Amore. The 3 Live crew are going to win the NWA tag team titles. BG's doing his rap from 1998 to get a start here, and the crowd seems to be into it. The live crowds just love 3 Live crew. I mean, I know that at times the internet wrestling journalists, they were pretty critical of BG James and the 3 Live crew, but when they came through the curtain, I didn't hear any criticism. They were over with the fans there, right?
And I kind of look back, and we've had this discussion. We had it during the time. If we were a touring property, the 3 Live crew, I don't think there would be a night that you, A, wouldn't have them on the show, and B, that they wouldn't be just because they could, their charisma with the live crowd is what kind of took them to a different level. The studio component, it didn't know, the studio may lean more into the action and the wrestling and everything that goes with that. But yeah, I don't even want to call it gimmick. Those 3 guys together, I thought had a great chemistry.
Next up, we've got a promo from Raven where he's going to cut a promo saying something along the lines of being crazy is the only thing that's kept me from going insane. I think he borrowed that from Waylon Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that due to the lack of food, water, and light busted out, he did a little poem. Monty Brown, Abyss, Welcome to the age of apocalypse. I'm in a game of fools without no rules. Monsters ball. They'll take the fall. I drop the bait. I decide their fate. Dropping the bomb. Intellectual Vietnam. Hardcore to the bone. My home is your home. Welcome to the Terror Dome. Jeff, what's your favorite poem in wrestling?
Oh, don't quit. I don't know. I'd forgotten Raven kind of threw that on us. So he did that in the pre-tape. I'm trying to think. Yeah. I don't know. What's your favorite point, Kami?
I just think it's hilarious that Raven's dusting that off.
Yeah.
Andrew Dice Clay, one of the best Twitter followers around, or Twitter follows around, says, first TNA shirt I owned was a 3 Live Crew one, a classic case of the sheets not getting it and the fans loving it. I mean, listen, that was kind of it. We're also going to see another commercial for Russo, and then the bagpipes start. We think we're going to get Piper's Pit, but instead it's really just Piper in the middle of the ring with a large picnic cloth.
Yeah.
It's written here in the Observer, or the Figure 4 rather. Even Johnny Fairplay got a nice plant. This promo here is where he's introducing a real legend. I'm talking about Piper. And he says, the man who put the X in the X division before there even was one, Jimmy Snuka. Lots of criticism here that this is inconsistent rambling for 20 minutes. Eventually, we see Kid Cash interrupt the segment, and he's going to let Snuka know he couldn't carry my jockstrap. Love that. Cash is going to swing at Snuka. Superfly is going to block it, give Cash a chop off the ropes. Anyway, Shane and Kazarian somehow get involved. Sanjay Dutt's doing a run in for the older folks. And we see Cash and Dutt mixing it up here. As you might imagine, there is a coconut spot. It's a pay-per-view. It's total nonstop action. And we've got a talking segment with
forever.
Yeah.
He went forever. If I remember correctly, the old man and Bob Ryder were not real happy. Yeah, I'll just say that. That thing went forever. Like, I'd have to look at. Anyway, we had to readjust times quickly. Me and Jeff were cut that night as well, but it was a mess. Piper just said, screw it. I'm going to talk as long as I want. Less is more was never in his mindset.
Were you thinking, when this happens, at what point do you guys say, hey, we love Piper and we love his work and we respect his status as a legend in the business, but man, this just ain't a good fit. The juice ain't worth the squeeze for us. Is this it?
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're going to hear from Monty Brown, and he's going to tell us there's nothing more dangerous than a caged alpha male. And he's promising to end Raven's delusion of grandeur. And he's promising to end Abyss's constipation problems. And then he's going to do a wonderful impression of the monster Abyss taking a monster dump. You want to give us an impression of Abyss taking a dump? I know you've seen him take a lot of dumps in fantasy football.
Oh, weekly. I'd rather Silva give us like a 2-finger sniff and then.
Oh, God, let's not do that. We see a promo for the next TNA pay-per-view. That's important here. Then we get a Trinity video. And now it's Trinity's open challenge. It's Trinity versus Vince Russo's surprise opponent. And Trinity's accompanied by NYC's very own Swinger and Disco. Disco, if you remember, was fired a few months ago, but he's out here doing his best Chuck Palumbo. And Trinity is going to proclaim herself the undisputed Italian goddess of wrestling. And here comes Jackie out of the crowd. Not Miss Jackie, but the pretty mean sister and former troubleshooting referee Jackie. And TNA is going to mention that Jackie won the Cruiserweight title a few months ago. How did your old pal Jackie Moore wind up coming into the company?
You know what? And I'm sitting here looking at this these screen grabs that we see Mr. Referee Mike Posey as well. Andrew Thomas earlier, who now is a big part of AEW, but Jackie Moore. Look at Jimmy Suzuki taking photos at ringside, Conrad, as well. But Jackie, I guess, available and filled out the slot. We were trying to pull out all the stops, as you can tell. Snuka, Piper, Jackie, Hall, Nash, Savage. Johnny, we were trying to swing for the fences.
How far ahead of time was Jackie Moore? I mean, she should have been a part of the women's revolution. I mean, it's right time. I mean, right performer, wrong time, right? I mean, I don't think a lot of our listeners know just what an incredible performer she was and how far ahead of time she was. I mean,
way in front, because she was never a bra and panties. She threw punches like a man. She threw knees like a man. Her like I saw in spot shows way back in the day, her and Brian Christopher / Brian Lawler have single matches, and Brian in a good mood, and you may go to him and say, hey, we need you guys to do 15 instead of 7 or 8. And Brian was like, nope. I mean, he could go 20 and make it believable because Jackie could flat out work and sell. She could be a heel or a baby face. You said it best, Conrad, way in front of her time.
Next up, it's time for the Monsters Ball match. Bonnie Brown is going to pick up a win over Raven and Abyss. It's described as being a decent match, and man, they're brawling all over the place, all through the stands. Raven's even going to take a nasty back bump on the stairs. There's a hooded man shown lurking in the catwalk. He's not referenced for the rest of the night. Raven searching under the ring for things. He's finding a chair, and eventually we see Monty Brown give the referee a pounce. That gets a holy shit chant from the crowd. Abyss goes out of the ring, pulls out a small sack. Mike Tenay yells, you know what's in there? And it was not marijuana. It was thumbtacks. The crowd starts chanting Foley. Abyss is spreading the tacks out. He's going to try superplexing Brown. Raven's going to sneak up underneath Abyss and power bomb him into his own thumbtacks. And then, of course, Brown gets the pounce to nail on Raven into the table that's propped up in the corner, and that's the finish. Listen, tables, chairs, stairs, rolling through the stands, thumbtacks. What do you think of Monsters Ball here?
I thought it was a gamble for us to put Monty in that, but man, Monty, and we've done a whole episode on him. He was just really good, but you gotta, and I'm not saying Raven didn't QB it, but Abyss is the guy that was the glue that when they sat down and worked it all out, they put Monty in the best position possible to succeed. And you got to give Abyss credit for that kind of mindset, because he knew, and he's a rare performer that you walk into the ring and say, and know without confidence, with just 1,000% confidence, that Abyss mindset was, A, the match has got to get over, B, my opponent's got to get over, then C, I'll get over if those two get over. That's a pro's pro.
The next match on the card is going to be for the X Division title, but before we see it, we see a backstage promo with Coach D'Amore and Petey Williams. They're standing with Scott Hudson, and Scott D'Amore makes a guarantee that if AJ Styles wins tonight, I'll march back to Windsor, Ontario, and never be seen again. I'll leave TNA forever. So, of course, in the X Division title match, Petey Williams beats AJ Styles. And there's dueling chants. Let's go, AJ. Let's go, Petey. Petey's the master of the Canadian Destroyer here, so fans can't help but get excited about that move. And everybody in the building knows how talented AJ Styles is. Really, really fun stuff. Of course, the Canadian Destroyer gets it done, but the match is criminally short. And this has to be a lot because of the Rowdy Piper thing, right?
They cut mine and AJ's match.
Two incredible performers, though. And again, remember now, Piper going long here is when we've got all this stress and pressure of it being the very first 3-hour pay-per-view.
Yep.
It's total nonstop action. So respectfully, if we could have more time in the AJ Petey Williams match, or we could have more time of Rowdy Piper talking shit to Jimmy Snuka, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Exactly. And that falls ultimately on me. Just thinking talent would play ball, and they didn't.
We're going to see a backstage promo where you're putting black tape on your wrist. Scott Hall's looking on. Jeff Hardy is going to shout at himself in the mirror. Kevin Nash is still missing. And then it's time for our last man standing elimination match, where it's America's Most Wanted and Triple X. These guys have had incredible matches together, but the newsletters did not love it here. They say they just didn't have it tonight. This is kind of shocking, but I can't help but wonder now that we have the benefit of hindsight and you've dropped that knowledge on us that Piper went long. Did this match not hit the way the other matches did because the expectations had grown unrealistic because the previous matches were so strong? Or did they have a great match mapped out and now at the last minute, we got to trim this thing up and it's just not the same?
My gut tells me the expectations, first thing you said was the biggest, but both were factors. And Chris and James were that babyface tag team that they knew how to, I'll say, kind of write the opening chapters to really put them in a position of not just the underdog, but the underdog babyfaces that really wanted to win. And Elix and Chris, fantastic workers. They were the kind of team that, coming down the aisle, they've got great athletic looks. I'm going to say there wasn't a lot to hate about them in their general appearance or dislike. And so they needed time to tell the story. Again, Piper went probably 15, 20 long, 5, 5, and 5. Take 5 out of this tag match. That's a lot.
We got to talk a little bit about Elix Skipper here. He is going to suffer a concussion during the course of the match and not even remember the match afterwards. Elix Skipper has always been one of my favorite performers for TNA. We first saw him in WCW. He was a real bright spot in my TNA fandom. Are you surprised? Or let me just ask you differently. Why didn't you guys push Elix more as a singles performer? Did you just prefer him as a tag?
I thought he was a much better tag wrestler. Look, he was in the X Division and Shine, but there came a point that I thought the most bang for the buck was, maybe it's this era of TNA as well, in that you just kind of think of the legendary tag matches that Elix was a part of. So I'm not saying it was bad casting, but that's where he was slotted in. And, individually, I'm not going to say Elix was the greatest promo either. Was he horrible? Not at all. But a singular promo, don't see that being a strong heel promo. And the babyface X Division, you kind of look at the roster from the PDs and AJs and other guys, maybe a little bit difficult. You can get him more toward the top of the card where he deserves in the tag division.
Next up, we're going to see Mike Tenay mid-ring, and he's going to introduce Dusty Rhodes. They're going to say that he's won 55.6% of the vote. He is the new DOA, and they're going to play Hail to the Chief. We'll see Russo shown backstage. He's looking crestfallen and chewing gum, according to the figure 4. And Dusty gets on the mic, and he says something like, "Tonight, this industry has been revolutionized. There's a new dog in the hunt. Way up north, they're glued to their TVs, and they're saying, we got a fight on our hands. Let them hear it all the way in New York." And the crowd is, kind of mild. We get a tight shot of someone actually asleep in the crowd. Maybe we shouldn't have shown that. But what do you think of Dusty sort of drawing the line in the sand, making references to New York? This feels like a TV moment, but again, it's in the pay-per-view. Respectfully, if you're thinking, hey, we're running long or we're running short, couldn't you have cut this segment out? Or did you feel like we've got to find a way to use Dusty Rhodes? He's a big star. We're trying to load this thing up star-wise. We can't cut Dusty.
Well, and the vote, we needed to, creatively, episodically, and we promoted the, votes. You're going to find out who the new, authority figure is going to be on this pay-per-view. So we delivered. And you don't want to say, Dusty, hey, we're just going to announce it offline. Thanks, but no thanks. So just out of due respect to the legend, and Dusty's going to go be Dusty. Here's your mic. Please don't go long. And he didn't. But again, Conrad, the misjudgment of thinking Piper would play ball was a mistake that we paid for.
Now it's time for our main event. It's called the Second Date with Fate ladder match. And Jeff Jarrett, here's what's written in the figure 4. Jeff Jarrett defeated Jeff Hardy to retain the NWA Jeffmanship of the world. Jeffmanship. The tale of the tape noted that the Outsiders were the X Factor in the match, which would have been a tease for the much anticipated X Factor reunion. Jarrett was quickly smeared with green paint / ooze. Hardy, of course, had green ooze all over his body, a reference to Kevin Nash's first starring role in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Hardy's gonna sandwich Jarrett in the ladder and hit a baseball slide. There's dueling Let's Go Hardy and Let's Go Jarrett chants. And there's speculation here. I wonder if these people really love Jarrett or just can't stand Hardy. Were you surprised there were Let's Go Jarrett chants?
Smaller crowd, and just a little footnote on his green. That was black and paint that was going to, what do you call it? Black light paint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a little, after the match, I said, your paint kind of smeared, pal. He said, yeah, I wasn't expecting it. Anyway, he because the entrance and the lasers, and he was focused on that. Little did he know, or I know, that was going to be freaking all over the place. But the dueling chants, again, it was the early days of Orlando that we had some really hardcores that I don't say wanted to be a part of the show, but yeah, that's a it's just the I want to call them just the smart fans, but that's how they played into it. Yeah, there was a vocal minority that didn't much care for Jeff's maybe perceived lack of commitment to the product.
We're going to see Scott Hall come out and give Jeff Hardy a razor's edge off the ladder. And eventually someone's music plays, and here comes Big Sexy. He's got a fancy velour workout suit on, and he's got 2 guitars on. And the crafty Outsiders are going to hit Jeff Hardy with guitars, as do you. And you're going to claim the title. The figure 4 says, man, this was bad. The NWO 2000 band is back together. Yawn. Nash got on the mic and said, I was wondering why Hardy was green in the match, and then I realized he was green with envy after standing next to me at the urinal. Yep, this was actually said on a show I paid good money for. I'm now green with Hulk-like rage. He said they were taking over. Yawn. And taking all the money. What money? And laid down a challenge to anyone in the locker room. AJ Styles came out and actually got some offense before getting the big boot of Nash while attempting the Styles clash on Jarrett. 3 Live Crew comes out and fights the Outsiders. Nash jackknifes BG, and the limo door finally opens. An electric guitar of pomp and circumstance hits as Randy Savage in all leather with a grizzly Bocephus-like beard comes out. Lame finish to a lame show. That's the recap in the figure 4. What do you think when this is all over with? I mean, we've talked about your very first TNA pay-per-view. That was a Wednesday night live here from Huntsville, a 2-hour show back in 2002. Here we are 2.5 years later, and we've got our first 3-hour pay-per-view in Orlando. Got a lot of stars on here. What'd you think? Were you happy? Were you pleased when the match was over?
I mean, mixed bag. I mean, a total mixed bag, knowing that the mindset of having headlines and star power coming out of it and as much buzz as we could possibly, Hall brings his buzz with him, and Nash and Savage and Dusty and Piper and all the different, I'll call them household names. We're just trying to get traction, the night as we got back to the dressing room or got back to the hotel, I just had a mixed bag feeling on, like I do a lot of times. Okay, could we have really streamlined it and just give him a wrestling finish, but then have him on TV? Well, could that just, I don't want to say second guessing, but for the, playing the tape through exactly what we did going into the show in creative meetings and thought processes and it's you always, and as we've done this podcast, because everything is so subjective, and you think through, man, you know what? The live crowd loved it or the live crowd hated it. Well, let's see if the buys worked, and let's see if next month we got a little up or a little down, because the lessons I've learned in that sometimes when you do something that is just terrible, business can jump up and you don't really have a reason to put your finger on, and vice versa. But for the most part, stay true to the course and try to keep building that momentum. But after it was over, and even as we sit here and do this podcast, is there a case to be made that it was what's the term, they overbooked? Sure. But on the other hand, what was it coming out of the gate with as much star power as possible? And you just kind of look back over time where it's WWF or WCW or WWE or AEW, loaded shows up to come out with as much star power. You're never going to please everybody, ever. And so I thought it was a hell of an effort, and one that, without question, set us in the right direction. I will say that. Even with the Piper stuff, it is what it is. You got to take the good with the bad.
Would it have been a stronger ending to put the title on Jeff Hardy here?
Yes.
Was that not an option because you didn't think, respectfully, he was reliable at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, you can kind of look through the history of these years.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just take it's a gamble. Without question, it would have been a gamble.
When it was all said and done, what'd your dad think of the show? Was it thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle? Who was really excited and who was really disappointed? Do you recall?
For the most part, Mole Man, unless something was really bad, he would always come in and if there is the occasional match where he thought guys didn't maybe put out, look, he hated stuff. This is Jarrett, but he if there was some, he would call it silly shit that didn't need to happen, that he thought, his translation of that is, okay. And he was like me. I mean, comedy's always got a place for it, but sometimes you can put comedy in the wrong place at the wrong time. It can kill the show. And we were both believers in that. But for the most part, if Mole Man thought that the talent busted their ass and absolutely gave the best possible effort that they could, he would always be upbeat after a show and very appreciative of that. I learned that from him too. Guys go out and bust their ass. It's not like they go out and try to have a bad match, so he was happy with the effort and happy with the results.
Have you ever heard of anyone intentionally tanking a match?
That's a good question. Intentionally? I mean,
you've heard of guys sandbagging each other, right?
Yeah, and you just kind of look at guys with boo-boo face. So, but they go out and kind of go through the motions and do the. I don't know. That's a good. Well, we could probably do a little research and pull certain folks up and say, yeah, that's a little sandbagging here or there, or he wasn't happy because of the outcome of the match that it was about to take place. I don't know.
Jeff, let's shit on somebody. Who sandbagged you before? You got somebody who went up like dead weight. I know it happened at some point.
You got any ideas in your Google machine?
I'm sure you had some in Mexico.
Hell, don't remember those.
Psycho Clown never sandbagged you?
Oh, no. I mean, he potated the shit out of me multiple times, and we had some fisticuffs, but I love the dude now. I mean, no, he never, I mean, he's a hard-working dude.
Do you remember any heavy guys leaning on you, trying to wear you down to slow you down?
I always got cute. Scott Halstead has the heaviest 230-pound man he's ever laid eyes on. Sandbag. Hell, I don't give off this to know if somebody's going to sandbag me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. What am I thinking? No, you would be the one sandbagging other folks. I got
you. Exactly.
Hey, well, we're not sandbagging you guys. We're live here at myworldpod.com. We got a ton of questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. And you need to make sure you're here with us next week. We're doing this every week. It's kind of our new fun deal right before Monday Night Raw. As soon as you get off work on Mondays, join us live here at myworldpod.com. That's myworldpod.com. We'll be back next week talking about Survivor Series from way back when. And I mean, way back when. What about 1994? Man, this is going to be a fun show. And what a crazy card it was. The main event was The Undertaker and Yokozuna in a casket match. But before we get there, we get the $1 Million Team with Bam Bam Bigelow, Jimmy Del Rey, King Kong Bundy, Tatanka, and Tom Pritchard taking on Guts and Glory. That's Adam Bomb, Bart Gunn, Billy Gunn, Lex Luger, and Mabel. We'll also see Bob Backlund and Bret Hart in a throw in the title match for the world title. What about the Royal Family taking on Clowns Are Us? That's a real thing. And then the match that I'm most excited to talk about, what we'll be spending a lot of time on next week, the Bad Guys, 1, 2, 3 Kid, the British Bulldog, Fatu, Razor Ramon, and Sion taking on Diesel, Jeff Jarrett, Jim Neidhart, Owen Hart, and Shawn Michaels. That's our topic next week. Join us here live on Monday at myworldpod.com.
And I'll just give you the little hook. Our man Bruce came to me. Hey, Jeff, Vince wants you in the main event. A young, spry Double J said, oh, really? And we'll talk about it next week. That was Bruce's pitch to me.
Let's put a button on this 2004 Victory Road episode. There's some criticism at the time that some of the guys in the locker room feel like the Best Damn Sports Show period actually got better matches than Victory Road 2004. I know the first 3-hour pay-per-view is a big deal, but you're kind of obligated to swing for the fences. I mean, for Best Damn Sports Show period, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. You've got to put your best foot forward there. You've got to give them some good stuff, right?
Yes. And George Greenberg, he was in charge of the show and a high-ranking executive at Fox Sports. You know, at this stage of the game, we didn't really know where that relationship was going to go. And, you know, man, give me your best stuff as far as in-ring, where you just don't want to change the channel. And I would have those kind of conversations. But, you know, we leaned into, you know what, the network wants this. Yes, it's a time buy. Man, oh, man, we were hopeful that relationship could go to the next level. So it was a no-brainer for us to give them the very best we thought we could without getting into our pay-per-view, you know, storylines.
We should also mention, you know, we've touched on it last week here on the show, that there was discussion that there was going to be TNA on TSN in Canada. As a matter of fact, there's television listings that even showed it appearing on January 19th. That's a Monday. And it was called TNA Impact Wrestling from Orlando. TSN had it airing on a Monday at 4 p.m. starting January 19th on the channel guides. Now, of course, we know it didn't actually wind up happening. Lots of people believe that WWE perhaps put pressure on TSN, and there's been people inside of TNA who say that's exactly what happened. Others say, no, TSN was pissed off that Scott D'Amore accidentally leaked the news on the radio. Which one of those do you think is more likely, Jeff?
WWE.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Definitely.
All right, we're getting ready for Survivor Series next week, but before we do, let's do some questions. Boy,
right
what a name this is. Trigger Cheese says, recall meeting AJ in WCW? What were your thoughts of him then? I think a lot of people forget that AJ Styles was actually in WCW at the very end. Did you meet him there? Do you remember that?
Just vaguely, and he tells a story, but James Storm, there was some kind of scene where we used a bunch of extras, enhancement guys, but I mean, nothing vivid or clear. You know, the scouting, the summer of no worries, the scouting of talent is really my first AJ kind of introduction. So, you know, his moniker, phenomenal. Just the spring in his step, his athletic ability. From the very first day I met him and watched him, I knew this guy's in a league of his own.
Pondwater Dave wants to know if you remember Tully Blanchard blowing you up in Tampa in 2005. Not really. He says, does Jeff own a Preds jersey? And if so, whose name and numbers on the back?
I got a Jarrett one. I got a Pecorine. I got 3 or 4. Oh man, we're going back years. Pondwater, you don't deserve to know the other two, but I know I've got Pekka jersey. Gosh, Oh, I can't.
Instagram a wrestling historian wants to know, why did Vince Russo leave TNA after this pay-per-view?
He left after the first one. I thought D'Amore did. Was it time for him to move to Colorado? 04?
I think this would have been when he was, doing the Unforgiven book and all that. So
yeah, I was going to say, I don't think this time when there was any certain falling out, I think we built toward this. He lost the directive authority, and I think he had to do something in his personal life.
Cowboys fan for life says, I ordered Magic Spoon yesterday, got peanut butter and cocoa blueberry cereals. Thank you. Appreciate you supporting the pod. Primus versus Unicorn says, if Lex wasn't in the dark place at this time, would he have been in TNA and possibly been a world champion? That's interesting. He was a big star.
Yes.
And if he didn't have, for lack of a better word, the monkey on his back, do you think he would have been a featured player on TNA?
Yes, I do. I dialed in Lex. You kind of look back in that WCW run, and I know you guys have talked about it, different things. He's on a roll. He was super over. Put in the right position, Lex is a real player. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Jackie Moon is with us here, and he wants to know, is Cody excited that Young Thug is free? What's Cody think about Young Thug getting free? Or do you have thoughts about Young Thug?
I would rather hear your thoughts on Mr. Young Thug. Cody has thoughts about everything. His most recent thoughts are the percentages of the Pittsburgh Steelers winning the Super Bowl, which miraculously are up around 7 or 9% or something like that. That's what he's waiting for me to watch a little Monday Night Football.
Jeff, I don't know if you saw this or not, but are you familiar with something called the ESPN Power Rankings? They're setting aside over at ESPN what the top AP rankings are and what the perceived playoffs are going to be. And they just say who they think, based on what they've seen right now, who the strongest team in college football is. And they'll give you a power ranking saying, we think, no matter what the polls say, if the playoff were to happen today, this is the best team in football. Did you know about that, the power rankings?
I've heard of them, but I know not day by day. So What do you got, pal? Lay it on me.
No, it's just Alabama's number one, like fucking always. That's all.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are. Look that shit up. Alabama's number one. Texas is number two. I don't know where Tennessee is. I didn't read that far down. Pondwater Dave wants to know, is that statue the actual one that was used in the Open of CWA? Of course, we're talking about in your set. We'll go to you as a one shot here. And we see the wrestlers there. That's not the ones that were used in the original television opening.
It is one of a group, but no, that isn't the one. Nope, that isn't the one. I've got a white one that sat in my grandmother's house for years, but that isn't the one. No, sir. Wish it was.
Coach Rosie wants to know, what's your prediction? Who wins the NCAA basketball title this year?
Oh, good Lord, Rosie. It's way too early.
Alabama's going to win.
Shit. Rosie.
Maybe not.
Who do you think, Rosie? Put it in the live chat there, pal. I love this little live chat we got rocking and rolling here.
Zach Ransom wants to know, do you remember anything about the first AEW House Rules event? That's a great question.
Sold out. Were you there, Zach? Yeah, sold out. It was something that, getting to, I'll say, touch and taste the brand and knowing that, I know they did one house show, but it was at Daly's Place. This was the first one kind of out in the market. It was electric, if you will. I love intimate settings. What's that building hold? 3,000, 2,800, 3,000, 2,500, something like that. They were packed in there on top of packed in there. I remember, I don't know how much you want to get into detail, but I know this. Claudio worked his ass off that night. And I remember him coming through the curtain. I went up to him and thanked him and had a conversation with him. But man, oh man, he is such a pro. I could go into it in multiple details here, but yeah, it was a fun night. A lot of fun too. Live events, non-televised live events have a unique personality all to their own.
Coach Rosie wants to know, what do you think about Conrad calling JBL out of the bullpen to fill in for Bruce on something to wrestle with? Have you heard that? That JBL, John Layfield is stepping up for Bruce Pritchard while Bruce is taking a leave of absence for a few days.
JBL is a storyteller. Here's what I want to watch. He's never had, no disrespect to Briscoe, because he's never had a Conrad Thompson. I think you're going to pull stuff out of JBL that people are going to listen to these episodes. I'm curious to kind of see where the topics go, and it's going to have a new personality. But at the end of the day, I think you are going to bring certain components out of JBL because he can tell stories.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. I'm happy for this, you guys.
Our first topic that just dropped today on Monday was about Bruce. But next week, our topic will be Eddie Guerrero. As folks are listening to this, tomorrow, Jeff, will be the 19-year anniversary of Eddie's passing. Can you believe that?
I remember the TNA show when the people started chanting, Eddie, Eddie. We were at the Orlando studios that week or that day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, we'd have to look that up. Historian, if you're on, but I just know it was just the Orlando crowd. Obviously, Eddie wasn't a TNA talent, but
I don't think it was that day because that was a Saturday. November 13th.
He passed away on a Saturday?
Yeah.
So did we have a pay-per-view on Sunday?
No, because you just did this pay-per-view right here.
Okay.
So it would have been just a few days after,
A few days, but whatever. Yeah. But
it is crazy to think the show we just covered, which feels like 100 years ago for me, was 6 days before Eddie passed away.
Okay. So it was our first show.
Yep.
Since Eddie's passing.
No. The pay-per-view we just covered was 6 days before Eddie passed away. That was this show was on November 7th. He died on the 13th.
So did we do TV on the 14th?
You did it in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
So you did it before.
We probably did.
It was just the next taping.
But anyway,
doesn't matter. D says, Double J, what would you say the difference between Mid-South / Memphis wrestling style was compared to today's 2024 wrestling style? Boy, that's a deep subject. Can you briefly tell us the fundamental difference between, Memphis wrestling and what we're seeing these days?
Oh God. I want to give a lot. So the difference, there was a simplicity that worked in, we'll call it the 80s and early 90s, but let's just say the 80s, that it's not applicable to today's wrestling for all, you can call them right or wrong reasons. But we're almost comparing basketball of the 80s before the 3-point line and before the shot clock. It just, yes, it was both done on a basketball board or a ring. There's almost no comparison, because I'm not going to say 2024 you don't have stories, because hell, every match I have, I try to have a story. But you didn't really lay out a match. You had to have at least the basics of what story we're trying to tell here. It's just a different era, completely different era.
It was a different era back in 1994, and that's going to be our topic next week. Survivor Series 1994 will be our topic. Join us live next week. You have a chance to interact with Jeff live here on the show, and it's free over on our YouTube at myworldpod.com. We're going to be hooking it up next Monday at 5 o'clock Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, just before Monday Night Raw. And don't worry, you'll still be able to catch the show in your RSS everywhere you enjoy podcasts on Tuesday morning. Jeff, I never know what to expect when we sit down and click record, but man, we got nearly 6 hours. We got nearly 5 hours out of just October and November.
Crazy.
2004. It was a crazy, eventful time in your life, was it not?
Well, it was, today recording this and thinking through it this even, Conrad, I didn't really realize how much pressure was on.
Yeah.
I'm living it. As I look back on it, there was a couple of times during the episode where I went, damn, man, we were rolling the dice. Now I know why I probably said, hey, we had to make a good impression. We had to. We really did.
Well, we hope we made a good impression on you guys. We hope you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, and tell your friends about your new favorite wrestling podcast with your friend in mind right here on My World.
Peace.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.